What's up, everybody? Welcome to the House of Mario, the South Australian Nintendo podcast that is backed by a 120 power star rating. And the doors to episode 203 are open. I'm really surprised that I didn't screw that up. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the House of Mario. This week we will be talking briefly about that Pokemon Direct that came up, the Pokemon Presents. And on top of that, we've got something very special for the rest of the episode. Nothing too big on the news today, just the Pokemon stuff. And to experience all of this with me, including our special little segment, we have a member from our Discord community who has been with us for a very long time, Mettadox. How are you going, man?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. How are you, Bryce?
I'm pretty good. I got one of my cats back yesterday, which was great, because he ran away for 6 months.
Gotta love it.
Well, we talked about it at the start of the show, but he's very skittish, so he's currently sitting on my computer desk while I'm recording. Hopefully he doesn't act up too much, but he should be fine. He's pretty sleepy, so no problems there.
It should be fun.
Today, everybody, obviously, we've got that Pokemon Presents we're going to talk about, so that's going to come out first. And then we've got something that I'd like to call Generational Gap with a Twist. So we've talked about this in previous episodes, as long as about like nearly 2 months ago, I think, where we're going to be talking about Pokemon generations as people who have entered the Pokemon series at different times. And then basically what's going to happen with that is we're each going to talk for each generation for 3 minutes, then have a round-up conversation, and we're each going to give it a score out of 5. I'm going to make a note of that, and at the end of it, we are going to take those scores, add them together, and see what comes out on top and what sits at the very bottom. So I need to open a notepad. I've done that. Sweet.
Should be interesting.
It should be really good because we've obviously both had very separate experiences to each other depending on where we've been at. It's been a long 25 years of Pokemon, so it should be very interesting to see how each of us views each generation. I'm very keen for that.
Yeah, not quite 25 for me, but yeah.
No, yeah, but like 25 for the series.
25 overall. It's
yeah, that's right.
Bound to have a lot of people with different experiences.
Well, that's exactly right. So without further ado, we're just going to get straight into this news. Obviously, this was big, and Drew won't be back for this week, obviously, because we're doing this right now, and next week, which I've got something else planned, and I'll talk about that briefly on the episode, but only hint at it. I don't really want to give it all away, and I'll tell Meta about it later because he deserves it.
Thank you.
He deserves it for coming on and being my extra this week, so thank you very much for that, man.
Anytime, man.
Easy. So let's get into this Pokemon news, man.
Woohoo! Yeah! Pika, Pika!
Is that all?
I fight for my friends.
Yahoo!
My body is still.
So, first of all, we've got Pokemon Cafe Remix news. Basically, it was just saying that there's going to be more Pokemon coming to your cafe, and the Pokemon are now able to eat the food that you prepare for them. Hooray! Fantastic.
Groundbreaking.
Yeah. Anything catch your eye here at all?
Oh, no.
No. Unfortunately, that's the thing with these Pokemon Presents is like all this mobile news that comes out. It's not very interesting, huh?
No. I have been meaning to try out Cafe Mix, but I just don't really care. It's not anything on my priorities.
Yeah,
I guess.
Yeah, and I played it for a very small amount of time, and it didn't hold me long enough. It was like a 30-minute run, and I was like, yeah, cool. So yeah, that's unfortunate. So I suppose if you're into Cafe Remix, just be aware there's new content. As far as I can tell, there's no date on some of it, whether there's some out now or what have you. So yeah, just check that out when you can, I suppose. Next up was the Pokemon Masters EX, which, we know that's got a very unfortunate hashtag, but here we go. We have, in celebration of Pokemon Master EX's 2-year anniversary, a new legendary event, Howling Shield of Eternity, and the power of Dynamaxing are coming to the game. from now until 10:59 p.m. To PDT on September 15th rather. Players can assist Gloria, Hop, and Leon as they try and help the legendary Pokemon Eternatus, which has arrived along on the island with a mysterious meteor. And so, being the second anniversary, obviously there's extra gacha bonuses, whether it be rolls or what have you, and a special version of N with Reshiram, I think, to roll for. So, I mean, if you're in that gacha sphere, there's a really nice looking N there. I know that you felt pretty good about this one.
I like that design. I'm a sucker for a man with long green hair and suits. What can I say?
Yeah, and I mean, you know what? He looks pretty good. He's one of my favorite characters in the entire Pokemon universe. So seeing more end content is always great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love myself some N.
Yeah, he's Peter that can read minds. Hooray! All right. So next up, we've got Pokemon Go news. Obviously, this is probably the biggest news out of the lot, and that is Pokemon from the Galar region will be making an appearance from August 20 to August 31st. Obviously, if you're playing Go, you're already experiencing this. I haven't opened it yet. I really should. I want to get a Phalanx. But oh well. But you've also got Galarian legendary Pokemon Zacian making its debut in 5-star raids from August 20 to 26, and then followed by Zamazenta on 26th of August to September 1st. So this is cool. Bit of a random drop in its own sense. Just like in this Pokemon Presents, they're kind of just like, oh yeah, there's no significant date behind this. We're just going to put them here.
I'm kind of surprised that they did a little droplet of Gen 8 Pokemon before they even... Have they really finished with Gen 6?
No.
I don't think they have, no. And they haven't even touched Gen 7 yet, other than Alolan forms.
No.
I'm just very surprised that they decided to jump straight to Gen 8.
Yeah, see, I'm not really sure what their thinking was behind it. But, I mean, Pokemon Go has always been sort of a drip feed kind of game, and, like, you know, we had a Alolan Exeggutor, like, a long time ago for no reason as well, really, so it was... Yeah, I don't really know what their thought process is in the development team of Pokemon Go, but oh well.
No clue.
None at all. Alright, so next up, obviously, we've got some Pokemon Unite stuff. Those of you that have been playing, I hope you've had some good luck, and I know that this is going to be a lot of people's first MOBA, so I hope you're enjoying Rage Fests. So obviously they talked briefly about the Pokemon Unite launch over the course of the presents, and they also what was it? It was like a holo gear drop or whatever for Pikachu as well for pre-registering. I think that was it.
If 2 million, no, 5 million players pre-registered, they get the skin.
Oh, okay, cool. Very cool. Yeah, and it was like a really neat little holoware skin, so that's cool. But you know, overall, kind of just another thing that's like, that's okay, I suppose. It is claimable along with the Pikachu Unite license by completing the login event by October 31st. And the actual game will be available to download on September 22nd. How is your Unite experience going, Meta?
The only time I played it was when I played with you, actually. It wasn't too bad, actually. Obviously it's not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
It's got its flaws, that's for sure. But I think with some balancing, they could make it a lot better.
Yep.
It's not going to become the next huge esport, that's for sure, but I think it's got potential to become better as they keep working on it.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree with that, and that's the thing with MOBAs, is MOBAs are very dependent on their balancing schedules. If a MOBA game is not balanced, unfortunately, it usually falls to the wayside because people don't want to play unbalanced MOBAs at all. They get very competitive, even in the casual scene. League of Legends is a extremely good example of that. and it really sort of just boils down to, okay, here's Unite's coming to mobile on September 22nd. There's 2 new Pokemon coming out. It was Blissey and... Damn, who was the second Pokemon?
Gardevoir.
No, Gardevoir's come out already.
Oh, is there another one?
Yeah, so I think it was like Blissey and something else, right? I'll see if I can pull it up real quick. No, it's actually not mentioned in this article. Oh yeah, no, hang on. There was Blissey, which was announced the other day, and then during that presents, they announced Mamoswine and Sylveon. So, I mean, I'm happy Sylveon's coming to the game. One of my favorite evolutions, hands down. So that's brilliant.
Yeah. I actually, I watched the presents in call with some friends, and when Mamoswine showed up, we were all just like, "Oh yeah, Mamoswine's awesome." I'm glad he's getting some love.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, he's definitely kind of that weird inclusion because he's not among the most popular Pokemon or anything, but it's definitely cool to see something being represented that isn't just the general, right?
Yeah, totally.
Cool. All right. So the last thing that's, I guess we'll call it minor major to talk about is the new Nintendo Switch Lite that's coming out in celebration of Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, and that is the Palkia Dialga Nintendo Switch Lite. So this thing, it kind of just looks like a grey Switch, like a grey Switch model, with a nice gold print of Palkia and a nice silver print of Dialga on the back. It is coming out November 5th. Yeah, November 5th. So, if you're a
little
fan
bit
of...
before
Oh,
BSP.
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So, I mean, if you're into it, that's great. I'm personally not interested in a new Switch Lite. I can really give less of a care, especially since the OLED's coming out. If I'm going to spend money on a new Switch, it'll be for the OLED. And I know that Drew's already dropped $10 on it. He can't get enough of his Switches. He's already got too many in his house, and now he needs another one apparently.
He's a sucker for Switch Lites, isn't he?
This is like this would have to be like his third or fourth.
Third, yeah, I'd say third.
Well, he's got the yellow one. He's got the special edition one. I swear
Sword and Shield one, yeah.
I swear he got another one.
Did he get the coral pink one? Or the salmon one when it came out?
I think he said he wanted to. I'm not sure if he did, and that's like what's hinging on my mind here, is I can't exactly remember. But he did get the special Mario Switch as well. That was just a regular Switch. So, yeah, I'm not too sure, but I mean, good luck to him having that many Switches in the house. He's gonna have to give one of them to his kid eventually. So,
I'm just looking at the design compared to like the Diamond and Pearl special edition DS Lite, and the Dialga and Palkia printings on the back are 100% identical.
Yeah.
They're exactly the same, which I don't have a problem with. I think they look great.
Mm-hmm. I think that's what they said in the direct, though, wasn't it? Was that it was
yeah.
It
was to mimic the Switch Lite, the DS Lite.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But honestly, this Switch Lite might be my favorite looking one. Maybe bar the pink one. I love it. It looks great.
I'm inclined to agree, but that's simply because I like darker colors.
Yeah, same.
So I mean, you know, that's probably just personal preference down to what it is. A lot of the colorful ones are actually pretty great as well. But because I'm more of a darker colored person, these ones are obviously a lot more appealing. It's definitely better than the Sword and Shield one, I have to say.
I don't mind the Sword and Shield one, but yeah, it's definitely an improvement, that's for sure.
The off-colored buttons and sticks and stuff, they annoy me, man. Yeah. I hate it. Oh, I don't know why it is that way. All right, so let's go ahead.
I know what Switch you went with in on launch day.
Oh hell yeah,
the grey one.
You know it.
Nah, Neon for life.
All right, let's move into the actual content of this Pokemon Presents.
The good news.
Yeah, that's right. The good
Or the
news.
better
So
news.
we got some little trailer footage and a little bit more information on Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl. Not that they really needed any a heap more clarification, I suppose. A lot of the stuff that people took away from this was more actually in the trailer itself rather than them talking about it afterwards. And that was stuff like contests coming back in full, obviously seals on Pokeballs, which is great. The Underground is back in its full glory. And then there was also like a little sprinkle of stuff in there that you were kind of like, whoa, I didn't expect that. And I think the biggest takeaway from me from this little showing for Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl was the fact that they have underground caverns filled with Pokemon that you access through the underground.
Yes. Oh man, I'm so happy that they like completely revamped the underground. Like they changed the name even to the Grand Underground.
Yeah, that's
But
crazy.
apparently the type of Pokemon that changes in those caverns vary depending on the statues that you have in your secret base.
Oh, really? I didn't
and
actually catch that.
Yeah, I believe they said it at some point in their little explanation reel, but it's to do with the type of the Pokemon. So, like, if you put like a Jade Milotic statue and a Blastoise statue, it'll increase the rates of water types. Same for like fire, grass, etc.
Right.
But
Well, I'm glad you caught that.
yeah, I actually learnt like a bulk of that through the video that Austin John did, just covering like the website information that they didn't really cover in the trailers.
Yep.
Just going in depth with it. But yeah, no, I'm so happy that they did stuff with the underground and customization, trainer customization. It's not like the full shebang. It's more of what Let's Go did, but I think that's a great addition.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the game's shaping up to look a lot better than it was when it was initially shown. I know we talked about that before we started the show as well, but I think that's definitely like the opinion we hold. I think it's going to be good return to Gen 4 just for a little romp, kind of like Let's Go was for Gen 1. And I think that's all it really needs to be, right? That's the additional content is actually really great. I like that they're trying to do things with the underground that honestly, like I would have been amazed to have been seen in the original releases, but the fact that they're coming now it's probably not hitting me as hard as it would have back then, but like it's definitely a 100% I guess positive change in general for the underground. There was no way that like the underground being as it was, especially in today's standards, like where nobody can go outside and like have fun anymore, that the underground as it was simply going to do. This gives it a lot more single player content viability, which is fantastic. It means that it's not ignored, and I think that's really, really good for the state of that game.
Yeah, definitely. I do hope that they still include some of the things like setting traps and being able to run around with other players. And I didn't really play the Underground because I didn't have that many friends that were into Pokemon growing up, because it was kind of on its way out. COD was the new big thing. Whatever.
It's alright, we all had that despite whatever generation we're in. Don't worry about that.
Oh, definitely. But that kind of led me to never really using the Underground. But from what I remember, there was some kind of mini game with like how many times, or like something to do with like trapping other players and getting other people to walk into your traps. I hope there's like a little multiplayer kind of mini game to do with that. And they could even incorporate some of the new stuff with those Pokemon caverns. I don't know why I keep saying taverns. Just walking in and there's a Buizel having a furphy, something, I don't know.
Well, he's
No.
really floating now. Not floating.
No, but no, I'm glad that they did something with the underground, like proper. But yeah, no, the graphical overhaul in general, that happened, like just comparing the first trailer that we got back in February to this trailer, you can it's a stark contrast. It's like, it's black and white. You can see how much has changed, how much better it looks. They did the kind of field of view thing with that they did with Link's Awakening, which I know from what I remember you didn't really like.
Yeah.
But it doesn't look as intense as that
No.
was, which is good.
Yeah.
But it just the lighting and the details on like buildings and the grass and the trees and the backgrounds in battle, everything is improved so much compared to what it was back then, which we all were worried about. And then the Switch OLED trailer came out and we were like, hang on, that's different. And we all got our hopes up and they did not disappoint, which is good. But yeah, I'm very happy with the overhaul.
Yeah, me too. I think it's definitely looking a lot better now, and like I'm less worried, which is good. Obviously, as we sort of get into it, we'll discuss Gen 4. It's definitely not my favorite generation, and I mean I'll talk about it then. But it would be good to have something to just revisit it. I think that is like the main importance for it. So yeah, I guess just sort of to capitalize and cap off on that, comes out later this year in November. Yeah, hopefully that trailer left you a little bit more satisfied than what we'd seen sort of initially. Next up, all right, the next last big thing was more news on Pokemon Legends Arceus. So, talking about Legends Arceus, I don't think on this show we've ever said anything negative about it, and you know what? We're definitely not saying anything negative now. I definitely think this is a good push forward for Game Freak. Like, in general, I think it's great. It looks even better with this new trailer to see that there's new forms for Pokemon and new evolutions for Pokemon that were previously ignored to some degree or considered Trashmon.
Basculegion, I'm so excited for Basculegion.
Oh yeah,
One of the most unloved Pokemon from Gen 5 is getting so much more attention now, and its evolution is incredible.
yeah,
And the story behind it with the whole, like, it's infested with the souls of other Basculin that died on its travels upstream. That's insane. That's crazy. But the design is awesome as well, and they haven't shown off a blue stripe form, which I found interesting. But they'll probably
have to be one.
There's got to be one.
You would think so,
unless they do like a separate evolution. Who knows? I don't know.
unless they do
For
a
the blue stripe
Salandit.
form. Yeah, basically. Oh god, no, that would be awful.
You get a
no.
shiny Basculin that's blue.
would
Yeah,
cry.
but apart from that as well, they showed off that there's like very much like Pokemon Ride-ish features, like gliding with a Braviary and riding a Weirdeer and stuff like that as well. Something that's obviously very akin to Breath of the Wild, which is what people have always been comparing this to, is calling it Pokemon Breath of the Wild. I think it looks good, and I like the fact that when you initiate battles and stuff like that, or you've got Pokemon attacking you, they can actually like knock you out as a trainer. So what I'm presuming is that when your Pokemon get knocked out, you're not just going to be wiped out immediately. You're going to have the opportunity to run, which is something that is definitely different for Pokemon. And I think it's really, really creative in its own design that they're allowing that opportunity to be more reactive to Pokemon in the environment. I think that's really good.
Oh, absolutely. There's so much that I want to say about Legends. It is the game that I've been dreaming of since I was but a wee lad.
But a wee lad.
Give me a sec.
Here's the thing: is like, as this game sort of progresses in development, and more is shown off, there's a lot of people that naysay about it, and I understand concerns, especially because of Sword and Shield. It is sort of unfortunate that a lot of people are sort of dismissing this very quickly. I think it absolutely has the potential to really, really, really push forward and be sort of a standout for Game Freak, which is incredibly different for them. Having a new Pokemon experience in general is definitely just the highlight of it all. Whether it'll ever sort of integrate some of those things back into the main game, I'm not quite sure, but it's definitely caught my attention. It feels a lot more alive, which is fantastic because Pokemon's felt very static for a long time. The wild area was a step up for that in some respects, but it also feels like the wild area was very much a beta test for this.
Oh, 1,000,000%. Absolutely.
Yeah. Like, it is sort of a case of like, there were Pokemon in the wild area that would just react to you standing there or running around, or they would see you and just sprint after you. And they were kind of like, they were really testing out like, I wonder what would happen if a Pokemon saw you like out in the open. And it's obvious that they've tried it, they've taken that data, and they're like, all right, let's put that into a big open world Pokemon game. And I think that's great.
Definitely. One thing I'd like to bring up actually is the trailer back in February. A lot of people were talking about how choppy the animations were for the Pokemon in the overworld. Specifically, the Chingling was really bad. That was moving very, like, 10 or less frames a second. But actually, in the new trailer, you can see it's a bit out of the way. It's hard to like notice, but you can see a Chingling in the background running at a much smoother frame rate, which is very good to see. I'm really glad that they're upping the performance, because like we saw in the wild area in Sword and Shield, it had its dips in performance, especially when you were online, which definitely held it back from being the smoothest experience. But it's good that they're paying attention to that. I feel.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that too. I feel like they have looked at the people's comments and they've really sort of taken them in stride, especially after everything that happened with Sword and Shield. Obviously, there was a lot of non-warranted comments against Sword and Shield, and some were, kind of harsh. But I think most of the player base in general were just concerned that, after paying so much attention to Pokemon as a series for such a long time, that they just wanted something to be of quality, and that's perfectly reasonable. But I think with just the constructive criticism that's sort of come out when the first trailer come out, and them looking back on Twitter or whatever socials they may be following to sort of gauge player feedback based on these reactions, I think it's worked well, and I think they're definitely finding their sort of balance, which is good. I really hope that they sort of keep this up and sort of push forward and make it just a brilliantly performing Pokemon game. Obviously, there's going to be problems. It is an open world game, but I think they're definitely on the path to good here.
I definitely think it's shaping up to be something special.
Yeah,
like I said, it's the game that I've been dreaming of since I was like 7. I always loved the idea of being able to just go out in a Pokemon game, go out into the world, see Pokemon running around, and just throw Pokeballs at them, or throw my Pokemon out, and then bam, battle starts. I think that's something that I really loved about the Minecraft mod Pixelmon. Um, I I never really got into that, but that was kind of like what I was wanting at the time, and then this is that, but just like proper, like, you know, the full experience, you know, not just a mod for another game.
Yeah.
Like, this is the open world Pokemon game, or at least the first, because I really do hope that they keep building upon this kind of gameplay with more Legends titles. Even like they could do more legendaries, like hell, Gen 5 they could do Legends, like whatever they decide the original dragon's name would be. I don't know,
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of potential in Legends as a spin-off series. But yeah, anyway, we've made it 32 minutes in. So what we're going to do is we're going to call it there on that conversation. It comes out in January, everybody. If you're excited, I suppose, just let us know in the Discord, which, by the way, you know, you can click that link down in the box and it'll take you there and you can talk to people like us. So, without further ado, let's move into the main meat of the show, because it's obviously going to be the thing that takes the longest.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think it's definitely going to be a lot of fun. So let's start it off with this this generational gap, we're calling it. So
Yes.
obviously I explained the rules earlier. We're going to go from Gen 1 to Gen 8. I think that's pretty simple.
Yep.
No questions asked. We're going to be on a 3-minute timer each. Obviously I've explained the rules to Mettadox already. 3-minute timer each, and we're going to time each other through our conversation. After we've finished our 3 minutes of gush, essentially what will happen is we'll just come to a conclusion, give it a score. I'll write down the score, and we'll combine the total. And then we'll do that for every generation, and then we'll go from first place to 8th place, like it's a race of Mario Kart. So, we're going to start with Generation 1. Do you want to go first, my friend, or would you rather I go first?
I want to hear what you've got to say first, I think.
Okay, no worries.
Yeah.
All right, let me stretch my lung muscles there for a second, because I've got a lot to fit in 3 minutes for just about all of these.
Definitely.
It definitely just stops us from going over time. So, all right, you can start the countdown whenever. Tell me when to go.
All right. We'll just go now. I've clicked the button.
Beautiful. So, Generation 1 was the generation that I started Pokemon with all that long time ago. It was obviously about 3 years difference out. Generation 1 definitely is an extremely quirky generation for Pokemon, mainly because it was its beginnings. That's without a question. The Pokemon sprites were definitely weird. All of them were strange in red, blue, and green, without any question. They definitely had some improvements in yellow, which were good. The overall flow of Generation 1 is pretty tops for what it's worth. The gym leaders are all very memorable people. There was a lot of weird bugs in Generation 1, and definitely getting through all of those existential challenges all the way to the Elite Four and beating the Elite Four there was one of the most elating experiences I had when I was younger. Holding up today, though, it definitely is a very rough generation in a lot of ways. Obviously, back in the day, they didn't have the same splits as they do now in terms of stats, and that made things either unbalanced or really balanced. It really is hard to tell sometimes. They also did some really bad decision-making with moves like Wrap, and Wrap Dragonite is considered, I think, the only Uber in the game. So that's kind of rough there. Now, overall, as an experience, Red, Blue, and Yellow are good games to go through at the very least once. There's definitely new versions of them out today that are better ways to experience Generation 1 without any question of a doubt. But thinking of it from the perspective as if it was the only game out at the time, it's very obvious why those games sold as many copies as they did. They are definitely rough, and they definitely could have used a lot more polish, but they were a very, very good RPG for the Game Boy. And I don't think anybody can honestly deny that. They were considered some of the longest, with one of the longest completion titles for the Game Boy in terms of like its catalog. And it definitely kickstarted something that would sort of come to a point where we have what we have today. And we can attribute that a lot to a lot of the Generation 1 Pokemon, a lot of the Generation 1 personalities, the merchandising around the game, the overall, I guess, idea generalization behind the game. And it's built something that's incredible from something that is really, really rough. So I can't really fault it all that much. It is a rough experience with rough. Damn it.
That's alright. That's time anyway.
That's okay.
That's alright. Yeah.
To finalize that off, basically, it is what it is. It's going back to it now is always going to feel rough. There's no question about that. But it hasn't aged. It hasn't aged like a fine wine. It's sort of aged like a cheese, if anything. And a cheese can be perceived in different ways. So you know what? Generation 1 is okay.
I like the cheese analogy. That fits quite well, actually.
That's right.
Yeah. All right.
So it's your turn. You
right.
You can prepare yourself, and I'll get you started.
Okay.
You just tell me when you're ready.
Yeah. Whenever. Just let me know when you started it.
All right, and it's go.
Okay. Well, obviously, it started off the whole bloomin' franchise. It hasn't lasted 25 years for no reason. These games were a craze, and there's definitely a reason for that. You can see like where people's excitement was coming from. It was a new thing, this whole idea of monster collecting, and that general gist, being able to interact with other players in a way that I don't think many people had ever experienced before. It definitely pioneered that type of multiplayer experience, at least I feel. The exploration was decent. I'm just going off of my notes. Exploration was really good. It really did feel like you were going across the country, just traveling from area to area, making your way from point A to B, C, whatever. It felt like a real place. Unfortunately, there wasn't really much to do after completing the game. There was obviously the Pokédex, finishing that. Mewtwo, that was a big thing with the cave, Cerulean Cave, I think. Very buggy, obviously, with the Mew glitch and being able to access the scrapped Professor Oak fight and a lot of other things. And the balancing was horrendous. Psychic types obviously need no introduction. They were absolutely overpowered. Ghost types were meant to be the counter, and there was only one line of those, and they were dual type with a type that was weak to Psychic, and a bug in the game made it so Ghost wasn't actually super effective against Psychic, which kind of ruined the whole thing. Not to mention the only Dragon-type move in the entire game, not just attacking move, just Dragon-type move overall, was Dragon Rage, which deals a flat 40 damage no matter what. And the only good like the best bug move in the game was Twin Needle, which only has 25 base power, hits twice, and is only learned by Beedrill, which is a really bad Pokemon in these games, like stats-wise, and it made Psychic way too powerful. But like I said, it's hard to fault it because it was the stem from which this whole thing grew. Yep, I'll finish my point. It's where this whole thing came from, so it's difficult to fault it for that. But overall, like you said, it's definitely an experience that you need at least once, but you don't really need to keep coming back to it. That's about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well said. All right. Well, so in conclusion, I think both of us can definitely agree that it is rough.
Yes, absolutely.
Without any question. Obviously, balancing was out the window in Generation 1. While like some of the sprites and stuff like that, I think personally they have charm in their own dated way, but they're definitely confusing by design for some of them.
If you compare a lot of the sprites from Red, Blue, even Yellow, to the stuff we've got in Gold and Silver, you can clearly see that even on the Game Boy they were not the best.
No, yeah, and it only took one generational bump to realize that they could be much better. But for what it was worth, like it is the beginning of where it is. There's no denying that whatsoever. And you know it's worth that experience once. But you're not going to sit there and you're not going to sort of get to the end of the game and then think, all right, what's the best meta I can make for Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow? Because the balancing is completely out the window. You can finish the Pokédex, but it doesn't really lead you to anything, and it hasn't really over the next couple of generations. So sort of run at edges. The main end game in that game was finishing the Pokédex and beating Cerulean Cave, which are both pretty short experiences for Gen 1. But as a Game Boy title, it was a really long experience, which is definitely something that you can't say much about Game Boy titles. Most of them were designed to be anywhere from 15-minute to 5-hour experiences at the very most, whereas like Pokemon lasted 20 odd back in those days even.
Yeah, it was an impressive game for the Game Boy's standards, but even that would be blown out of the water when Gold and Silver came around.
Yeah,
at least in terms of like sheer amount of content.
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have a generalized score for Generation 1?
Well, I think we should, so we're going 1 through 5, right?
Yes.
Okay, I think we should, kind of define what each number means before giving it that score.
Sure, we can. So we've got 1. 1 is bad, which I don't think any of us will ever hit. Without any semblance of a doubt. 2 is not as bad as you'd imagine.
Rough.
Yeah. 3 is sort of middle ground. 4 is it's alright, and 5 is like a definitive Pokemon experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
In that case, I was already going to probably give it a 2 anyway, but I would say 2. 2? It's rough.
Okay.
It's rough, but, it spawned the whole bloody franchise. It's hard to hate it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, personally, I would probably... Thinking of it from the perspective of somebody that played it at the time, it was definitely a 4 for me. The thing that annoyed me most about Pokemon back in the day was that, you had to buy 2 versions, and even then... You weren't able to guarantee all the Pokemon with the exclusive Mew being there, and obviously that was a huge problem in some countries where that kind of thing wasn't easily accessible, which, that sucks, and that was a drawback to generations in the earlier side of Pokemon. I think all the way up until Generation 4, we did not have much access to those kinds of things at all to sort of celebrate the game with fans and stuff like that. And I think overall 4, because it definitely kept me engaged, and I've played them again throughout the years, and I still enjoy them even today. There's definitely no question about that. So I think personally for me, 4 is definitely a fair score. All right, so no, go on.
Sorry,
no, go on.
Just as a final thing, obviously you played them when you were very young, when you were growing up.
Yes.
Whereas my experience with them was on the tail end of Gen 6, I believe, or approaching into Gen 7. That's when I really, that's when I first actually sat down, played through all of Red on the 3DS Virtual Console. That was my Pokemon Red experience.
Yeah.
While I enjoyed my time with it, it's definitely, I had experienced the much more polished Pokemon games before that, so yeah, it definitely felt a bit jarring.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, at least.
And I mean that's what we're sort of discovering here while we're talking about it, right? Is that as people that experience them at different times, we're definitely going to have those different opinions and difference in opinions. And it's definitely the biggest case with Generation 1. I don't think that, and I don't think either of us could dispute that Generation 1 is obviously the hardest one to go back to in terms of where you sit on a scale of how familiar you are with the new Pokemon as opposed to old Pokemon. And that's the same with a lot of video game series. A lot of people that started with 3D Zelda find it really hard to go back a generation to 2D Zelda, for example.
I understand that completely.
Yeah, exactly. So it is kind of that is the discovery of it, and Gen 1 is definitely the hardest to go back to in that sense. But Gen 2 is going to be extremely interesting.
Gen 2 is going to be an interesting thing. I actually personally think that Gen 2 is the harder one to go back to nowadays. But I'll get into that when I have my 3-minute long spiel.
All right. Well,
anyway, do you want to go first again, or?
I mean, if you like, or you can get into your spiel as soon as possible.
Yeah, why not, honestly?
All right, no worries. I'm going to start the timer
okay.
Now.
Okay, so Gen 2, I feel the post-game was incredible, especially coming off of Red and Blue, which had basically non-existent post-game, and the final boss, obviously being Red, which is the protagonist of the first game, it was you from the previous games, was awesome. That is an idea that I really wish they replicated in Black and White 2, but they didn't. Either way, really good idea. I also think that the music and the theme of it felt a lot more traditionally Japanese in the towns like Violet City and Ecruteak City. I felt it had a much stronger theme than Kanto, if it even had one, let's be honest. But it definitely was reliant on Kanto, and especially Kanto Pokemon, because a lot of Johto Pokemon like Murkrow, I believe, Slugma, and a few others can't even be found until the post-game in Kanto, which is why. But also, the level curve in the late game is awful, especially leading up to Red. You do need to do quite a decent bit of grinding, even just before the Elite Four. But I think that is more of a way, more caused by the way that the game was intended to be played, which I'll get into a bit later. But the wild encounters in the areas around Red and that area are around level 20s, and they do climb a bit as you climb Mount Silver, but still not great. The story was also super underwhelming. They had a really good setup with the Golden Rod radio takeover, setting up for Giovanni returning and and the Lake of Rage was also really cool with their little base there and Lance, but they kind of just dropped it after that. It went nowhere. Really disappointing, in my opinion. But back to, that's all I have to say about the story, really. Aside from the fact that Silver was a really cool rival, but I feel like the game was intended to be played kind of similarly to Animal Crossing, in which you come back each day, do battles with people who call you on the phone, and you slowly grow your team's experience levels over time, rather than just playing through it in like making a week out of it, like a lot of people do now, which is why I think it's a lot harder to go back to compared to Gen 1 or some other generations. Anyway, that's literally all I had to say. I was starting to worry that I would just be like, that's all I have to say. Time.
No, you did a very good job, and there was a lot of agreeable points there for sure. But we'll talk about that in the conclusion.
Of course.
All right. Okay. All right. I'm ready.
Okay. Started.
Okay. So Generation 2 was my previous generation favorite. For very similar reasons to what Meta's just described. It definitely boasts one of the best endgame contents in any Pokemon game without any certainty. A lot of the Japanese stylings and stuff like that in the towns definitely makes it a lot more vibrant than just very static sort of, I guess, non-basage sort of thematics in Kanto, at least from Generation 1. It was definitely a huge step up in terms of a lot of things, but the things that really grabbed me about Generation 2 were timed events, definitely. Timed events made logging in on a Friday special so that you could go and do the bug catching contests and stuff like that. Generation 2 had the best basis for lore, and was the first game to really, it was the first set of games, Gold, Silver, Crystal, to set up a lore in a way that's not just, I'll read a book in a burned down laboratory, which was pretty much the only lore that you ever got from Red and Blue. So that was also brilliant. The introduction of shiny Pokemon, that was a massive change for the game. It made a whole new collection, I guess, sub-quest in trying to find as many shiny Pokemon as you could, even though it was extremely difficult. And getting one, apart from obviously the shiny red Gyarados that you get for free, was considered a massive triumph back in those days. There was a lot of good sort of beats with the rival. The rival follows you all the way throughout Johto and through Kanto, and he has a very good story development arc, as opposed to your rival in Generation 1 that doesn't change by the end of the game. He's still a stubborn asshole no matter what. But in Generation 2, they showed that he grows up. They showed that Blue grows up, which is absolutely fantastic. A lot of the Pokemon in Generation 2, I love. I think their designs are absolutely brilliant. Obviously, there's still some that do have problems today. Pokemon like Dunsparce, or, well, not so much Murkrow these days, but definitely for a while, Murkrow was in a very ignorable state. I can definitely agree that the leveling can get a little painful when you get to Kanto and you're headed towards Mount Silver. It definitely gets real struggly there when you sort of hit, I think it's probably about the 6th gym, and then you start to notice the levels go up, and you get to Mount Silver, and then all of a sudden everything is just really strong, and the final fight in the game being Red, he's just stupidly powerful. As a kid, that was a very difficult challenge, but it was also amazing to overcome. Knowing that all my work paid off and I could beat Red, and I was like, holy crap, I actually did it. I beat Red. And knowing that I could sort of go back there every now and then and fight him again was sort of just an elating feeling. So Generation 2 for me is 100% a culmination of like massive improvements for Pokemon, as well as a awesome end game, which is something that it never had before, which gave Pokemon purpose. And I think I didn't even mention breeding mechanics, but like, you know, there's heaps of introductions into Generation 2 that shaped Pokemon to what it is today. And I think that's extremely important for the series, even more so than Generation 1. A lot of people sort of go, oh, Generation 1 is the most important because it introduced the series, but a lot of the mainstay mechanics that are in Pokemon today were introduced in Generation 2.
Yeah, no, you raised a lot of good points that I definitely missed, especially with the introduction of shinies. Oh my god, how the hell did I miss that?
Yeah.
I completely forgot that they came in Gen 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've never seen a shiny in Gen 2, I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
Other than the Gyarados, obviously, but no, yeah. It definitely did a lot of firsts for the series, which you have to give it respect for.
Yeah.
It's just what I find what I really don't like about it is how difficult it is to play, to play through nowadays in a way, in a similar way that I would with other Pokemon games. Not to say that that's bad. I really like the idea of a Pokemon game being able to be that little play a bit today, do this, this is on today, it's Friday, I can go see if the Lapras is there, but yeah, no, it's definitely, it's not a bad set of games, definitely, but
Roaming
it's,
Pokemon,
it's
damn, yeah, I forgot about that too.
Oh yeah, no,
Roaming
oh my
Pokemon.
god, roaming legendaries, jeez,
Yeah. And that's
bane
the thing.
of my bloody existence.
But I mean, that's the thing with Generation 2 is that it did introduce a lot of those things, and I completely understand your point about Team Rocket making the comeback and stuff like that, and that not really paying off. And they did eventually rectify that in Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but through an event, which is really irritating. So here in Australia, we never got that event, so that really does suck. It sucks. It sucks because it was a huge payoff for Gold, Silver, Crystal in terms of why didn't that happen? And then they kind of explained that Giovanni he realized once he fought Red that being a mob boss is not somebody who he wanted to be when he started training Pokemon, right?
Yeah.
And to have that in the game would have been 100% better. And
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it would have given Giovanni a shit ton more character without, having to inflate anything like that. But I think it's definitely the fact that the game introduced so many mainstay mechanics and also had one of the most elating end games possible that really it stayed on top of my favorite Pokemon games for so long as a result. But story was definitely the reason that mainstay story, so the Team Rocket stuff was absolutely the reason why it dropped off my top list, the top of my list, I should say, for another generation. We'll obviously speak about down the line. I think we're both very keen to get to that one.
Definitely. Yeah, I've definitely grown a lot more fonder of the characters of specifically Giovanni and Silver over the course of me reading the Pokemon Adventures manga, which this is gonna be my little shill for Pokemon Adventures. Please go read it.
Yeah,
it is a wonderful piece of Pokemon media. Even if you're not into reading manga, or even if you're into reading manga and you're not that into Pokemon, go read it. It's so good.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of the characters feel more real. Giovanni gets a lot more character, I feel, in the manga. I don't want to spoil anything, but he has a very, very standout moment towards the end of the Red, Blue, Yellow arc. And Silver in Gold and Silver. I'm currently reading Gold and Silver. I'm not too far into it, but Gold and Silver it's really good so far. But Silver's character is really, really cool. I love the way that they've continued on everyone's character arcs into the next gen. Anyway.
Yeah, and I mean,
Point
I think
is, I just wish they did more with those characters in the games.
Yeah.
Because reading that, it's like, wow,
Mhm.
these characters are really, really cool.
Yeah.
How did they based that off of what they got from the games? Like,
Yep. And I mean
wow.
that's the thing about the Adventures manga, and like I'll always be a shill for that too. The Adventures manga really puts a lot more flavor into the Pokemon game universe, which is saying something because it's a manga. But and considering the anime as well, where it's always focused around Ash, it definitely does help these older games feel like more of an experience, because you're sort of experiencing them from a perspective where the characters have more personality, right?
I believe, actually, just a quick point, I believe that Junichi Masuda actually it was either Junichi Masuda or Satoshi, I forget his last name. I should know this.
I should too, but
Anyway, sorry?
I should too, but
Yeah. It was either one of those two, but they said that the manga's world was the closest thing, at that time was the closest thing to what they had envisioned for the Pokemon world when they were creating the original capsule monsters stuff before, that went on to be Pokemon, which if that doesn't convince you to read the manga, then you're a lost cause, I think. No.
All right, well,
Yeah.
let's
Enough about
let's
the
put
manga.
it. Yeah, I was gonna say let's cap it at that, and we'll just tell you to go read the goddamn manga. Just do it. Just go read the manga. It's really good.
Really cheap.
It
Get the box sets.
Yes, it is. It is super cheap. It's really good too. So there's really no excuse. So on top of that, now we're up to Generation 3, and this is probably going to be a little bit of a blind spot for you, because you've let me know that you haven't done too much in Gen 3.
I've pretty much completely missed out on Gen 3, other than people doing challenge stuff on YouTube. That's my whole experience of Gen 3.
All right.
I've never sat through a game, so my opinions are gonna be very short, I think.
That's okay. I mean, that's fine. But before we do go into it, though, we probably should give a score for Generation 2, which I almost forgot.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I almost forgot that as well.
So personally, for me, I'll put mine out there. It's a 5. That's it.
Oh,
it is top of the top for me. There is very few Pokemon experiences that beat it. And honestly, I think it was the perfect follow-up game, and the fact that we had our man Iwata jump in on board to help fix a lot of the problems, it's crazy how much that improved Pokemon as a general series. Even just on the Game Boy, I think it's the perfect follow-up to Generation 1. And yeah, there's not much more else to say to that on my end for sure.
yeah, definitely. I think I would see. Originally, I was probably going to put it as a 2, based on my experiences with it. But you did bring up a lot of good points, so I that's enough to bump it up to a 3 for me, I think. Obviously, it's not, for me, I don't think it's the best thing that you can go to for the Pokemon experience. But it is definitely, if you like to play games like that, where you just go back for a bit more each day. Different events happen each day of the week. Different things happen. I really do think that is the game for you. And honestly, I wish they did more with that kind of idea.
Yeah.
Obviously, not as intensely, but they kind of just dropped it. So, yeah, unfortunately, but
oh god damn it!
I would say 3.
I just thought another thing. Pokeballs outside the main line of Pokeballs as well. So like the heavy ball and the love
The
ball and
apricorn
stuff like that,
balls,
they were all
yeah.
Generation 2. Holy crap, there's just so much crap in
Gen
Generation
2
2.
did
Yeah.
so much. Wow.
It did.
Yeah.
Alright, well I've got that scored down and I've got it totaled. So we'll move on to
Good.
Generation 3. And you know what, I'll spare you the pain and I'll start on this one because I know that
Good idea.
it's definitely going to be rougher for
Mine-
you. So
I'm not getting the 3 minutes. I'm just gonna put that out there now.
that's okay. You just call time on whenever you want on this one. I will
Yeah.
definitely carry this conversation here because
Oh,
I spent a
100%.
lot of time playing Gen 3 without absolute certainty.
Definitely.
Okay. All right.
Alright,
Shake it up and
Sorry.
ready whenever.
Whenever you're ready.
Mhm.
Oh, hold on. There we go.
All right. Okay, we good?
Oh, hold on. Yeah. I'll reset it. Okay,
All right.
go now.
Okay, sweet. All right, so Generation 3, Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. Beautiful games, they always have been, and I've always respected them as games. They're definitely... I don't even think they are technically in my top 3, but Generation 3 is definitely the most social experience that I got out of Pokemon during my time playing Pokemon as a kid and sort of growing through that generation. A lot of people in school were playing it, and my friends group were playing it. We're always trading, we're always doing things. Generation 3 it kind of dropped a little bit of the ball by sort of like moving away from, the day-night perspective and stuff like that. But it did introduce a lot of other cool things, such as being able to grow berries and check them, and sort of diving underwater to find something completely different underneath the surface. It introduced a lot of mysteries into the game, such as like the Braille for the Reggies. It had Mirage Island, which was absolutely mental. Like, finding Mirage Island was a spectacle, and if you ever did, like, you could say you were one in like a million Pokemon fans that ever did it. There was a lot of... there was obviously a stat shift as well. They did a lot of this physical special split stuff, which changed Pokemon competitively for the remainder of the series whatsoever. Going into Emerald as well, you also had the Battle Frontier, which made brilliant use of this. It was the most, like, it was technically PvE, but like from the perspective of like trainer versus trainer, it was really hard content and really long content, and it could keep you engaged for a long time for completion. This generation, we also saw the first set of remakes, which was Fire Red and Leaf Green, which were both brilliant remakes that added a lot of extra content. They had the option to trade between Ruby Sapphire, which meant that you could port over Pokemon from a different region entirely and use them in your playthrough in Kanto, which is awesome. I don't think anybody can really fault that. It's definitely one of the most solid generations, the only obviously generation released on the Game Boy Advance at the time. It did have a share of its problems, and that's that they moved way more towards having event Pokemon. They had obviously 2 in this generation with Jirachi and Deoxys, things that a lot of people couldn't obtain depending on where you were in terms of country. There was some sort of like the IGN meme about water, which was sort of, put out there for Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which absolutely carries over to Generation 3 because they are literally the same games in terms of world building. So it is sort of definitely does have its flaws, but like a lot of those time events revolved around that water as well, such as the Shoal Cave and stuff like that. So I can't really sort of fault it for that. But overall, Gen 3 is just like the solid, balanced Pokemon experience that really tried to push to make Pokemon a lot more variable by introducing a stat split. And it also introduced a hell of a lot of good Pokemon, a really cool story, and Generation 3 was the birth of remakes. So there really is no fault in that.
Yeah. You summed it up definitely better than I will.
That's okay. That's okay.
No.
I trust you to do a job. Let's put it that way.
I'll. This one's from the heart. I don't have any notes other than too much water. Ha ha ha. Funny. So yeah, this will be fun.
But that's okay. I'm sure you'll get through it. So, are you ready? Are you ready to start the time?
Yeah, should be fun.
All right. Okay,
Cool.
I'm going to start it right now.
Okay, so Gen 3 had was obviously the transition into 16-bit, which did a lot for the visuals and even the audio. Obviously the overabundance of trumpets was a big thing, but you could you could definitely tell how much more this game looked and sounded and felt, if that makes sense. It was also the introduction of double battles, which is pretty cool. Which is now pretty much the whole competitive scene. It revolves around doubles. And hell, even with a lot of ROM hacks and stuff, they make a lot of their battles double battles to make them harder, more strategy. It is probably the Pokemon battle type if you're wanting to use your brain. Too much water, haha, funny. Yeah. But also with Fire Red Leaf Green, it was the birth of remakes, and is the definitive Kanto experience. Like, if you're telling someone to go play a Kanto game, you're going to point them towards Fire Red Leaf Green instead of Red Blue Yellow or Let's Go, especially not Let's Go. That's a different thing entirely. But even with it being the definitive Kanto experience, it still had more content that I won't talk about Let's Go too much, but it should have had the Sevi Isles. The Sevi Isle was really cool. It gave you ways to get Johto Pokemon that weren't available, because you couldn't get all of the Pokemon in Ruby and Sapphire, and we weren't sure if we were going to be able to. It was like the first deck set, which a lot of people forget, which is interesting, but they did rectify that in those games, which is good. But yeah, it's overall a pretty damn solid generation. That's about it. That's all I got.
You know what? For somebody that hasn't played Generation 3, you did very well. You actually made it to 2 minutes 50. That was really good.
That's surprising. I was just kind of talking out of my ass, honestly.
Well, it shows enough that you know your Pokemon knowledge enough to know about Gen 3 and what it sort of brought to the table. Like, that is sort of the thing, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Generation 3 is it's Drew's favorite generation. I'll put that out there, so I won't bash on it, otherwise he'll kick me off the show. But you know what? Generation 3 does introduce a lot. It's definitely one of those games that a lot of people remember fondly, and it is one of the most approachable generations for modding too, which makes it extremely good in regards to making fan games and stuff like that. Nintendo, I know you don't like that, but people make some really genuinely good stuff out of the Generation 3 games. I think that, like, overall, solidly, I would probably personally put it at a 4. I don't think it made any... I mean, it made some landmark changes for PvP Pokemon, definitely. But because PvP Pokemon definitely wasn't as prominent at the time, because you obviously don't have like access to the internet in the same way, and you actually have to go to events which were not in every country and stuff like that, that sort of does bring it down a little bit. It's obviously huge with the Battle Frontier. There was a really good way to utilize that in a non-like player versus player space for sure. But because those changes were mainly made to sort of make the competitive scene a bit more interesting, you can definitely tell that's why they did it. It's it sort of brings it down a little bit for me. They put a lot of focus on that, and because there was hardly any access to the events where we were, it brings it down to a 4. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough. I would probably put it. It's between 3 and 4 for me, but I would definitely. I think I'd put it at a 4. It's definitely a very good
4.
Set of Pokemon games. Yeah, 4.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I do think that they were landmark games in terms of how they did specific things and like. Go ahead.
I wasn't gonna say anything.
I thought you were.
That's right.
Okay, so I definitely think that they were landmark games in terms of like how they did specific things and like the Reggies, for example. And there was a lot of rumors surrounded around the game and how to obtain certain things like that as well. Like, more so than Generation 2. Like, sleep in a bed 100 times, then go to the space station and you will fly to the moon and get Jirachi type of thing. Like, that was an actual rumor that went around.
Yeah.
And rumors like that were in Kanto with the truck and the lava. Well, the truck where the lava cookie is in Fire Red and Leaf Green was where Mew was in Kanto. There was a lot more rumors like that for Generation 3 than there was Generation 2. There definitely was some in Generation 2 with the GS ball and stuff like that. But I think Generation 3 had a lot more rumor mill going on about it. And that made the game extremely interesting just through player conversation, right? So, yeah, I definitely think it sits at a 4 for me. I've put it down 4 for you, so that gives it a combined total of 8.
Yeah.
So that's pretty good overall, I would say. But let's move on to Generation 4, shall we?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so do you want to start this one off, or do you want me to start it off?
Yeah, I'm happy to start it off if you want.
Okay, sure. All right.
All right.
If you are at the ready, I will press start.
All right. Whenever you hit the button, I guess.
All right, go ahead.
Cool. So, I think exploration in Pokemon peaked in Gen 4. I think the way that you move throughout the region is really, really good. Especially with Mount Coronet cutting through the middle and going up and down through it. Even as early as going to Orberg, which is the first Gym's town. The way that you just move through each region and even each route, and like even just the intricacies of each route, the way that it connects to other parts, like there's that little slope above Orberg that you later go to Eterna, you get a bike, and you learn you can go up and down that with the bike. It always feels like there's a new way to traverse the region, which I really love. I also think it's got the tied for with Gen 5 for the best art style and soundtrack of 2D Pokemon games at the very least. There are so many good songs in the game. I won't even try to list any, but like, you listen to the encounter theme for Cynthia before the battle. Oh my god. It gave love to some older Pokemon as well, with like Gliscor, Mamoswine, just giving new evolutions to those older Pokemon, even as far as Magmortar, Electivire, and Rhyperior, even though not many people like Rhyperior. I think it's fine. But it definitely did a lot in terms of giving more love to older Pokemon in terms of evolutions, and even baby forms like Bonsly and Happiny. Nobody really cares about those though. Then obviously Heart Gold, Soul Silver, massive games. Everybody loves them. I don't think it's. I loved playing through them. Like, as much of a Gen 2 humbler as I am, I really loved my experience with Johto through Heart Gold, Soul Silver. Gen 4 was also the introduction of Wi-Fi and the GTS and internet play, which really helped a lot of people connect from even further distances. It really built upon the idea of, you know, connecting with other people. Also, the physical special split is a good thing to mention. It did what should have been done in Gen 1.
Time.
Really. You know, yeah. That's about all I had to say anyway. Good generation, I think.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Some
Yeah.
really good points there that I also hadn't considered. So there you go. There's yeah, definitely a notch in my belt there that I need to improve upon when I talk about it.
Totally.
So,
Speaking of, are you ready?
you know what? I'm ready. Yeah.
All right. Well, why don't you just go on then?
Okay. So, here's the thing. I do have a little bit of grievance with Gen 4. It's definitely not in my top favorites. Definitely not. Generation 4 is hard for me because, especially with Diamond and Pearl, actually, it's definitely the main problem. Everything about Diamond and Pearl, and this shouldn't be a negative thing, but in this case, it feels like it to me. Everything about Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, you can look at that and go, oh yeah, that's from Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. And I think that is a problem. I think if you showed a lot of people... if you showed people that didn't know Pokemon, artwork between Pokemon and sort of something like that, and they go, which Pokemon are from the same generation? You showed them a chart of them, you could definitely pick out which ones were from the same generation when it comes to Diamond and Pearl. That's not a huge problem in terms of new designs, but definitely with the pre-evolutions, and I know that's a little bit of a controversial topic in the sense that it made old Pokemon more viable, which is definitely true. And I definitely think that's great. But I think like in terms of actual design, it looks very Generation 4. That's all I can really say about that. It's a little difficult. I had the complete opposite experience with Mount Coronet and some of the traversal, like Rock Climb and Defog. I thought a lot of them were more or less just hindrances. Mount Coronet became a little bit of a confusing maze at times, which really sucked for me. And I wasn't really patient with it when I first got into them, and that's sort of wherever. But overall, like, getting through the game and stuff like that, I do have fond memories of Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, but sort of just, like, looking back at it, like, in terms of, like, how well it's aged, personally, I don't think it's aged that well. But it's also, again, the generation that put out Heart Gold, Soul Silver. And Heart Gold Soul Silver is one of the best definitive Pokemon experiences you can possibly find. It is one of the best generations in terms of content, hands down. And they only added even more content onto it, including a modifiable Safari Zone, which is just absolutely incredible. And the fact that you could relive some nostalgia through the music and stuff like that by using a Game Boy tuner and stuff like that, I thought that was brilliant. They are definitely some of the best crafted Pokemon games. They do hold like some of Gen 2's problems for sure. But they are definitely some of the experiences that I would point to and go, yeah, that's definitely a game you should play if you want to get into Pokemon. They are chock with content, and obviously sort of it evens out at the end. I feel like it gets a little bit easier than it did in Silver, Gold, and Crystal. And I think that overall, as a DS experience, it was one of the best games in the library, no question. I don't think anybody can ever sort of... And DS had a huge library. I don't think anybody can sort of knock that back. Yeah, 100%. I definitely think that Diamond and Pearl and Platinum was a little bit weaker, and I don't think it hit the right notes for me. But Heart Gold and Soul Silver, definitely, it beat it out the park for me, 100%.
Yeah, no, you definitely raised a lot of good points that I had forgotten to bring up, like the whole Pokemon looking very Gen 4.
Mm-hmm.
That definitely is a prevalent issue. But like, look at Gliscor, man. Look at him.
Yeah.
Look at him. How can you hate him? No. Yeah, no.
I mean,
Good points.
I don't hate all of them. I just hate the fact that
No.
you can point at them and go, that's from Generation 4. And especially when they did that, I think because it was the generation that most prominently worked on trying to balance older Pokemon in order to bring them up to a better standard for themselves. So like, Murkrow, Murkrow, Gligar, Sneasel, Weavile, whatever, like all that, Tangela, just stuff like that. Magnezone, like, man, they took Pokemon from old generations, right? And this is the thing that really gets me, is that they took Pokemon from old generations, and they all sort of look unique for their time or whatever, but then they gave them an evolution that made them look like they were from Generation 4. So it is kind of like a shift between, like, they could have just made these Pokemon better instead of giving them a new evolution and making them look like that they were a product of Gen 4. Like, personally, just in terms of design, that's where Gen 4 catches me off guard. I'm kind of like, I should be excited about these things, like, especially with like Electivire and Magmortar, which are huge step ups in terms of power for those two Pokemon. But it because the design feels the way it does, I'm kind of just like, I don't know. I don't think they have to go back that far and change that, right? I think it's a bit different in the cases of something like Basculin and Legion, like as we've just seen, because Basculegion still feels like something that could have been introduced in Generation 5. Like it still has that art style, right? But anything introduced in Generation 4 in terms of evolutions is sort of just how I feel about it.
Yeah. See, this is where I think the entrance point differs, makes our opinions on this kind of thing differ. Because I have always known Magnemite and Magneton to evolve into Magnezone. It's just always been that way for me. Like, obviously, I learnt pretty early on that, Magnezone was a new evolution in Gen 4, but it's just kind of always been there. And it's always just been what Magneton goes into. I can definitely see how people can think like that. And I definitely get what you mean. They do very much so look different in terms of art style. But they've just kind of always been that way for me. So I don't really connect with that on the same
And I mean,
level.
this is the interesting point. Like that's what's interesting about this concept of conversation, right? Is that there's those little things that are going to pop up from time to time where I'm like, that's definitely my argument against it, but you're not, you aren't seeing it that way, because you kind of like, I mean, I 100% get that. Like, I can't fault anybody for having that opinion either, like from anybody that's sort of come in later, because that is the truth, like it's definitely a personal grievance for me. I know that a lot of people don't feel that way about them, but just sort of, I think from going from where I've started this journey to where I am now, they are just sort of the most jarring out of like Pokemon that they've gone back to sort of push their design up a bit. I think that's just sort of where it is for me. Again, making that Basculin comparison to Gen 4 Pokemon, like Basculegion, it's definitely not just hype for me now. Like, I genuinely think that's something that they could have done in Generation 5 quite easily. It doesn't feel like something that they've crafted for Sinnoh. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can definitely see how Gen 8's art style and the way that Pokemon's art has progressed. I definitely see how that has influenced the design, but like you said, it still feels like something that they could have done pretty much very similarly in Gen 5.
Yeah. All right, so let's go for a score on Generation 4. I'll let you pick this one out first.
Okay. I'm tossing up between 4 and 5, man. I'm gonna say, you know what? I need to give it to something, so we'll go with 5. It's a 5 for me. Yeah. Yeah.
I definitely can understand it from the perspective of like it introducing online communication methods and stuff like that as well. That was definitely a game changer for Pokemon, and definitely something I didn't consider when sort of going into this. So I can understand that score from that perspective pretty much alone. But yeah, I mean, is there anything else that sort of bumps it up for you?
Sorry, I had my mic muted. I don't know. I don't know what it is about it. It's just always been that big. Sorry, my sister's in my room glaring over me. It's always been that big Pokemon thing. Like, my best friend growing up, and even still today, their favorite generation has always been Gen 4. And it was always a close second behind 5 for me. That was until later on when, you know, they introduced new stuff and new generations, you know, changed the order around and stuff. But Gen 4 has always been that Pokemon thing. It's always the see, for some reason it's always the Pokemon game that I think, like, this is the most Pokemon.
Okay.
You
Yeah.
get what
Okay.
I'm saying.
Yeah. I think I understand. Yeah. All right. Well. You know, sort of keeping the things in mind for me. You know, I did not consider sort of like the online features and stuff like that as well. That sort of has messed with my score a bit. I was more than willing to give it a 3. Not because, like, you know, I did talk a lot about how sort of like Diamond and Pearl sort of let me down from a perspective. But, you know, Heart Gold and Soul Silver being as good as they were, as well as like some things in Diamond and Pearl, like I have cherished memories of, like I can't really deny that. And then on top of like talking about, you know, like the GTS and stuff like that, I'm like, oh God, why didn't I think about that shit sooner? So, you know what? I'll give it a 4. I'll be fair and give it a 4 because it definitely did make a huge shift in Pokemon. I was pretty dead set that this was going to be a 3 for me, but now that I think about that, that is definitely like something that absolutely changes the ballpark. Honestly, without a doubt.
Internet play did so much.
It did. It changed a huge amount for Pokemon in general. Without any question. It made trading easier, it made, you know, getting exclusives easier, it made just communicating with friends a lot more efficient. It was really good.
Yeah.
All right, so this is the big Mundo for both of us. Generation 5. Generation 5. And you know what?
Yeah,
I'm really excited to get your opinion on this because this is technically your first, right?
Well, I was introduced to Gen 4 and 5 about the same time. I think it was fairly close after Gen 5 released. I'm not too sure. It's very hazy. But I didn't really pick up Gen 4 until after, because funny story. My copy of Pearl was pre-owned, and it had a save file on it, and it was a girl, and I was really upset because I didn't know how to reset it. So we took to the internet. We got that sorted, but I kind of didn't pick it up and really get through it. I think the furthest that I got was probably 5th, maybe gym, until I went back and played a bunch of the Pokemon games for my living decks, and that was actually the first time I'd beaten Gen 4. but Gen 5 was where I really is what hooked
Yeah,
me
okay.
basically. Even though I didn't know how to build a team and just ran through the entire game with my Emboar, I still loved it to pieces.
Yeah.
So this is definitely going to be a big
All
one
right.
for me.
Yeah,
Both of
yeah,
us.
definitely.
Do you want to
Yeah,
start?
you know what? I will. I've got a lot to
Yeah,
say
go
about this
ahead.
generation, like without
Absolutely.
any questionable doubt. So I'm ready whenever.
All right. Well, I'll just let you go.
Okay.
Then, right now.
So Generation 5, without without any question, Generation 5 is the definition of a Pokemon story done right by any stretch of imagination. So Generation 5 was obviously Black and White and Black 2 White 2. These games were crafted for somewhat of an older audience, and they've made that known before. They are crafted for an older audience in the sense that it does tackle something that is more of like a real world issue, and that is the ethics of Pokemon. And capturing them and using them for battles and stuff like that as well. The evil Team Plasma, well, it kind of had a little bit of a weak start because Team Plasma was sort of just like, it's like, shut up, dude, they're my friends. But as time went on and sort of like, N sort of was introduced in slowly, and then N sort of made his rivalry known to you as a person that respects Pokemon and loves Pokemon, and he also sees that you respect and love Pokemon just as much as he does. And then coming through all the way to the end when you had to verse N and the betray and like the sort of stuff that happened with Getsus, it did craft one of the most unique experiences from beginning to end, especially at the end when sort of everything sort of just changes. It then moved on into the sequels. The sequels were amazing follow-up games, and they made me feel a lot of the way that I felt between Generation 1 and Generation 2. Except this time they carried on the story. It might have been through a new character perspective, but the fact that there was a huge story told between, the two plasma teams, one that was sort of on N's side and one that was on Getsus's side of the cognitive thing, as well as, the Pokemon World Tournament, and seeing, like, different points in the region that weren't ever explored in the first. It overall is just, like, such an elating experience that makes this story feel complete, which is something that I can't really say about any Pokemon games in terms of like how they operate. I just feel like Black 2 and White 2 in terms of like everything for me was just perfect. The Pokemon designs, like a lot of people like to shit on them, but there are so many good Pokemon designs in Generation 5 that people just overlook. A lot of the environments are very pretty in Generation 5 too. It's very based off New York City and the lights and all that stuff as well. Then you've got, the deserty sort of regions, which is cool too. And I think just when it comes down to it, Pokemon should be able to tell a story, and it should be able to tell a story really well. They've been doing these games for so long. We understand the draw of Pokemon, and that is like the monster collecting and stuff like that. And seeing new Pokemon is definitely a part of that experience, but when it comes to like driving up the scale, that's kind of where it needed to be. It needed to create a memorable experience that everybody can look upon and say, that story was something that I'll never forget. And you know what? I've never been able to say that about a Pokemon game except Generation 5. So yeah, that's definitely where I'm at with it.
Absolutely. I'll let you have a bit more time on that because I wanted you to finish that point. But absolutely, you summed it up so well.
Yeah.
Which obviously I'll be getting into very soon. Obviously, I touch on more than just what you
and
have talked
and
about.
I mean, like that was the thing that drove it home for me. It was
100%.
It was the thing that made Generation 5 Generation 5. It was that sort of elating experience. Like I could put a lot of like the new features they added aside and talk about the story for 3 hours. Like it was really, really good. So And I mean, like, you know, sort of talking about the story was just where I was sort of going to go with it. There was definitely no way that was going to change for me. But I know that you've definitely got some different thoughts on it too. So, not different in how you feel, but definitely, you know, what you got from it. So
definitely just more. Yeah.
All right. So whenever you're ready to start, man.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just start now then. So, exploration, while it was dumbed down a bit, and it was definitely the start of the trend of 8B, like linear plots of progression from city to city, it definitely still had the exploration within the routes. There was so many different branching areas that you could go to. It really made every route feel like its own area. Like there was so much to look for. There was so many like deep little crevices that you could find different items in and stuff. It was really cool in that regard, I think. Also, the art style, gorgeous. I think it's probably my favorite Pokemon art style. Tied with Gen 4 for me. Same with the OST. The OST is fucking incredible. Sorry about the language, but absolutely incredible. And if they do Gen 5 remakes, if they butcher the OST, I'm going to sue them. The story, I'm going to try to be as brief as I can with the story because there's so much, but the characters in specific, they felt so real. They felt incredible. There's spoilers for both Black and White 2, by the way. The scene at the end of the game, in the En's castle after you beat N, where Ghetsis kind of reveals his whole thing and like the manipulation that he had over N as a child, and called him a freak without a human heart. Oh my god, that. Not to mention, even just Charon and Bianca, your rivals, they felt really grounded. Charon, there was a standout scene with Alda just after the 4th gym, where he is questioning him, why isn't he taking his job more seriously? Why isn't he, like, he's taking Pokemon so seriously, and I think that's such an interesting way to portray the kind of dickish rival. He wasn't really a dick, but like it was similar, but in a unique and different way. And his whole character arc was awesome. And I loved seeing where his character went in Black and White 2. As well as Bianca, I loved how her character evolved, especially in that scene with Elisa. It was really cool seeing her dad kind of come to terms with the fact that, you know, a little girl was going out there. And also another character, Black and White 2, Colress, was really interesting, to say the least. I can't really put my finger on exactly why. There's a lot to do with like the power of Pokemon. He wasn't really on Team Plasma's side. He was just kind of coexisting with them, and I find that dynamic really interesting. It was also the introduction of triple and rotation battles, which I really liked. I think rotation battles are really cool. Kill me now. I think it's a shame that they kind of omitted them from future generations, but whatever. Also, that scene where they fucking freeze Opelucid City in Black and White 2, oh my god. That was that was incredible. That was actually insane. Like, watching that as a kid, I was mind blown. And the Shadow Triad, oh my god. The whole mystery surrounding them, and every time they appeared on screen, it was like that wall in between you and the big bad guy, like you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But it was quite unfortunate that so many people disliked Gen 5 to start off with. It was probably the most hated generation, and I think Tyranitarchu made a video about it. That I kind of agree with. That it was because it lacked the familiarity that other generations had. Obviously, in Gen 5, Black and White, they started out the whole generation with only being able to access new Pokemon, which was, in a way, the soft reboot of the franchise. It was, and it was jarring to a lot of people, I feel, because there wasn't that familiarity. You know, you walked through a cave, you didn't find Zubats anymore.
I found Woobats, which is
it was all
generally worse.
new until the post game. Yeah. I prefer Woobat, actually. I think it's better Pokemon, but whatever. No, I think they're both good. But yeah, no, I think people definitely overstated how bad it was. And like you said before, with the whole people shit on the Pokemon designs from Gen 5 a lot. They've probably got some of the best designs from the series, in my opinion, at least. Hell, even like a lot of people hate on Garbodor, or like Vanillite and that line. I think they're fine. It's a lot to do with the whole like, oh, inanimate objects are running out of ideas argument, which has become very prevalent.
Which is a really stupid argument, considering Pokemon's lineage.
Which is really wrong. Oh, absolutely. Even like in Gen 6, the what's it called, Klefki? That if you actually look into that Pokemon's backstory, like and the idea and the lore behind it, it's really cool. That Pokemon has one of the coolest lore, in my opinion at least, one of the coolest like tidbits of story behind it, out of pretty much all of the Pokemon. It's got such a cool backstory. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's based off of some really cool shit. Anyway, yeah, that's my spiel over. I definitely went over.
You definitely did, but that's okay, because I sort of let that roll into the conclusion.
That's fine.
You know, I think that's the thing. Especially when you were talking about Pokemon designs just then, like it's an argument I'll never understand when I look at Pokemon like Scolipede, Leavanny, Lilligant, Crocodile, Cofagrigus, Braviary. You've got Mandibuzz as well, Golurk. A lot of people shit on Druddigan, but to be honest, I like Druddigan. I can't hate it. Hydreigon as well. Like, man, there's a lot of good Pokemon in Generation 5. Keep going.
I definitely feel like if they made Emboar a ground type, I definitely feel like his design could be fire ground instead of firefighting. I feel like if they made him fire ground instead and just kept the design the same, he would be so much more loved, because that design is incredible. Like, I know Drew absolutely hates Emboar for whatever reason. Obviously there's a bit of nostalgia in like talking from me, but just looking at it, it's 1,000,000% my favorite of the firefighting styles by far. I know a lot of people don't reciprocate their feelings, because like Blaziken and like Infernape, like they're cool, don't get me wrong, but it's a Chinese Emperor pick. How awesome is that?
Cool. Like
anyway.
that's the thing. It's like my honest opinion, the weakest out of the three is Oshawott, and that's really strange to say, considering the design for that Pokemon is also really good. But like, like Superior being being the snake Pokemon that it is extremely different from like other snake designs in Pokemon. By the way I feel about it, at least anyway. Like it's very regal, which is sort of like attributed to, like really well to its design. Samurott itself, like the fact that it's a samurai, and the fact that like until you see like the animations and stuff like that of it unsheathing its like shell sword, you're like, what? But like, there's a lot of designs like that in Gen 5 that just they blow me away every time I sort of like go back and think about how many good Pokemon were in there. Even if you just like threw Vanillish and Trubbish to the wayside and forgot about them. Like there's Zebstrika as well. You've got Galvantula. There's a ton of Pokemon in there that deserve a lot of love. I think your discussion there on Tyranitar Tube saying that it's about familiarity is 100% correct. I think that is the overlying problem with Gen 5 is that it doesn't feel familiar to people who are playing the games before. But you know what? Honestly, I think that makes it a better experience. The fact that they've detached this world and made it its own thing in order to tell a more coherent and exclusive story in Generation 5, only to sort of come back with the sequels and mesh the world with Pokemon from other generations as well. I think it makes the unique Pokemon stand out. I think that's definitely something that's needed, and I know that a lot of people want to sort of pass that to the wayside, but it definitely lended to Generation 5's magic. And I think, like, if there's anybody out there that sort of hates Gen 5 and you've only played it through once, like maybe back when it came out, definitely play it again today. Maybe go Black 2, White 2 if you feel like you can't deal with that familiarity sort of disconnect. But like, you're missing a lot. Honestly, there is a lot to that generation, and like, I think we could be talking about this for hours. So
I could do a whole podcast episode.
Absolutely.
Just about Gen 5, man.
we better not push too far on it. But like, here's the thing: is like, I there's no way I'm not giving this generation a 5.
Oh yeah, no, same. I was fully considering, like, saying before we even started Gen 1, just to be clear, we're both giving Gen 5 a 5, right? Yeah, absolutely.
That's the thing. It's something that's it's a generation that's underappreciated, and it's underappreciated for the wrong reasons. And if you can look past that skin deepness of non-familiarity and sort of just indulge in it as its own unique experience, it becomes a whole completely different thing. And that's what makes it so special.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. No, it's a magical generation. I really don't know how to put it, but yeah, no, we should.
And this one is where nails hit the floor. So, at least for me, anyway, I know it definitely hits the floor for me. But Generation 6, you know what? I'll let you lead off with this one. I think this dynamic of like taking in turns for first is working extremely well, and this definitely should help me clear my mind a bit about Gen 6 before I jump into it too negatively. So yeah, definitely. I'll let you go first, and you just let me know when you're ready.
Yeah. Easy. Yeah, I'm ready to go. So I'm just gonna say, as with every Pokemon game, the music, 10 out of 10. I don't think there's been a single Pokemon soundtrack that hasn't bopped every single time. I feel like the art style was a good transition into 3D from the sprites, from the chibi sprites. It obviously was them obviously still trying to work out how to do Pokemon in 3D, which would get way more expanded upon in Gen 7, which we'll talk about later, but I feel like it brought Pokemon into 3D decently well. Obviously, they had to allocate a lot of time into putting every single Pokemon into like 3D models, taking into consideration gender variants, alternate forms, whatever. That was a huge chunk of effort that they put in. Obviously, it was the introduction of Megas and Primals, with Oras at least, with Primals. I think it's a great mechanic, but I don't feel like it should be brought back for every generation. I feel like it doesn't have the staying power behind it. I don't think any gimmick really will. Like Z-moves, Dynamaxing, they don't have the staying power, to keep going through each generation. That kind of thing was regional forms, which again we'll get into in Gen 7. But it was definitely, the games were too easy. No question about it. They were way too easy. The story was also coming off of Gen 5 especially. Oh my god, the story was really disappointing. It had a lot of potential, I feel, with the whole, I want to destroy the world. I want to make a new, beautiful one. It was definitely, it was a bit reminiscent of Gen 4, I feel. But yeah, the story could have been much better, and the evil team were just so wacky. They looked ridiculous. And then there was this weird. I wrote this down. The Lumio City save glitch, like where if you saved in Lumio City, you there was a chance that your game file would just corrupt, like for no reason, which was a mega problem. No pun intended. When the games first came out, and they patched it very quickly, which I believe was the first time Pokemon has ever been patched after release. But yeah, not too much to say about Gen 6 overall. Just not the best Pokemon games. Yeah, that's about it for me.
I think you've got it pretty well summarized. God, I got to stop coughing tonight. I can't help it. It's definitely going to roll into my conversation about it quite well, to be honest, because I have a lot of feelings about Gen 6 in terms of what it did to Pokemon personally. So I'm ready to talk whenever you are ready to start that timer.
Oh, absolutely. I'll just start it for you now then.
Okay. All right. So Generation 6. Generation 6 is hard because that transition to 3D kind of killed the game. And that is unfortunate, like super unfortunate to say, but it made it, like, going into it, it felt like the transition to 3D was more important to them than the actual state of the game. So much to the point that they didn't even craft a third version, which was, up until that point, something that technically hadn't ever been done before, if you count Black 2, White 2 as the third version. And that is, pretty depressing in its own part, because they had a whole thing set up for Zygarde, which would be explored later in a different generation rather than in this one. The end game in X and Y was extremely disappointing. Your literal squad of rivals was more irritating than actually helpful. The difficulty of the game was so low that Drew beat the entire game solely with a Pikachu and HM slaves just to get him across objectives. If his Pikachu would die, he would intentionally wipe. And he bet it entirely with a Pikachu. And that wasn't too far after the game had actually released. He was like, I reckon I could do this with just a Pikachu. He did it with a Pikachu called Pikadrew. And you know what? Pokemon designs and stuff like that, yeah, some of them were definitely cool, but holy crap, X and Y was an absolute letdown, and it felt like it was all for the sake of introducing Pokemon to a 3D scope, which I don't even think was 100% necessary for the series at that time, with the 3DS's limitations. So now, moving on to RS though, RS is a fairly decent remake. It definitely didn't hit the same beats that Generation 2 did. Generation 4 did with Gen 2. But RS did introduce a concept in hunting down legendaries from every game, which was, absolutely fantastic. It definitely gave people a reason to shiny hunt legendaries, and flying on Latios to find gates around the world. Latios or Latias to find gates around the world was really cool. And the Zinnia story at the end of the game to fight Deoxys with Mega Rayquaza, that was super dope. It was really good. But the thing that really ticked people off is that they introduced a new island to do endgame content at, and they had a model of the Battle Frontier on that island, and when you clicked on it, it said coming soon Battle Frontier. So everybody got excited. They're like, whoa, the game's going to get updated to get Battle Frontier, and it never did. And the Battle Frontier was the standout thing from Emerald, and everybody was excited to see that there was a possibility it would come back, and it didn't. And that was the biggest letdown for that game, and that's sort of what dragged it under, especially when Gen 4 did Gen 2 remakes so much justice with the new Safari Zone, rotating Yeah, that's right. Rotating legendaries in the cavern for Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza, etc. There was a lot of things that Oris did right, but it also regressed a bit by the decisions the decisions it made for the sacrifice of having 3D just as X and Y did, and that's a shame. That's really a shame. It really brought the whole generation down.
Yeah, you put it pretty well.
So,
yeah, no, I think we both agree that Gen 6 wasn't the strongest generation.
I don't think there's any. I don't think anybody has. I mean, there's definitely some Generation 6 stands out there without any questionable doubt. But I think that mainly comes down to people who either played it first or maybe they liked the transition to 3D so much that it kind of overshadowed the problems of it. But I do think that like Mega Evolutions and stuff like that were a cool and unique concept in their own right. But yeah, their inconsistency to sort of keep a mechanic in the game throughout history does make it kind of a moot point, which really sucks. And overall, just like the game felt flat for the sake of trying to progress the series forward at a time it really didn't need to. Handheld Pokemon games, I don't think they ever should have moved to 3D. At least not on the 3DS. It took up way too much resources for the sake of looking prettier.
Oh, 100%. I think if they kept with if they built on what Gen 5's art style was, obviously bringing it up to the higher standards of the 3DS, it definitely would have been much better than just pushing it into 3D. Because I feel like if they waited for the whenever the Switch rolled around, which they definitely knew, not back when X and Y was happening, obviously, but that they knew at some point, obviously. Wow, my train of thought's just gone.
It's alright.
Nope, it's back. If they waited, they could have at least had a decent explanation for why each Pokemon wasn't going to be in the games, or at least they could have started building up that future-proof kind of database of 3D models for every Pokemon, and they could have spent more time perfecting them, getting rid of the kind of little details that like they're not the most important, but like just smoothing over the just getting rid of the creases. They definitely could have at least had a bit of more of a reason to be like, hey, we can't really include every single Pokemon in these games, because, moving them all into 3D within such a small time frame, not an easy task. But alas, they went with 3D, and it definitely, I definitely agree with you, it did harm the franchise a little bit, especially moving forward into Gen 8 specifically, I feel, which we'll get to.
I think the problem is that we're under the presumption, and I think they actually said that the reason they were sort of doing it was that they would get all the models out, and this would future-proof the the state of Pokemon for 3D, and it didn't. They had to go back and rework on the models again for Sword and Shield. Like, it completely stuffed it. They screwed the pooch really bad. And that's really depressing, and there's nothing they can do about it now. It's happened. It's stuffed up. And the Zygarde thing will always infinitely be confusing to me.
Oh
Why they did that?
They were planning like third versions. I'm pretty sure that they were planning an X and Y version with something to do with Z in the title, like that was found in that Nintendo
Yeah,
database
yeah.
leak that happened not too long ago, which is really interesting. They really should have done that, because I do think that X and Y, if they got those third versions, or those new games, would have been a lot better and a lot more higher regarded. Like Gen 6 would have been brought up a lot by those games,
Yeah.
fleshing out things that they couldn't in X and Y. But alas, we're a bit too far ahead of that. Almost
Yeah,
10
yeah.
years past X and Y's release.
And you know what?
So
To cap that off, the most depressing thing about Generation 6 is the anime was the standout thing about Generation 6. The anime was
my
actually
God.
pretty good. So, you know what? That's a little bit depressing. But,
yeah,
oh well.
absolutely.
Anyway, so a score for this one, Meta.
It's rough. It's
I think it's a 2 for me, personally.
I'm tossing up between 2 and 3, because I do remember Auras fondly. But I'm gonna have it's X and Y.
Yeah,
like
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I often, when I think about where I place each of the Pokemon generations, at least in my own head, I usually bump Gen 6 down, or at least X and Y down to where Red and Blue are for me. So it's probably a 2.
Yeah. It is unfortunately that rough that I don't think I can give it any more generous of a score, despite Auras being pretty good. I think the transition to 3D just kind of really did in that generation a lot. I understand what they were trying to go for. They were trying to improve it for the future of Pokemon games in general, but unfortunately, it just didn't do it. And then, it didn't help that the story was coming off the back of one of the best, one of the best things that had ever come out of Pokemon for a story. It was really, really rough in that regard, and unfortunately, Gen 6 really screws the pooch. But oh well, that's fine. We're moving on to Generation 7.
Totally.
There's going to be a little bit
Absolutely.
of ifs, buts, and ums about this one as well. But overall, I can't say that it's not an improvement.
Right.
So we'll talk about that one.
Yeah, no, this is where we differ again, because I remember Gen 7 very fondly.
and that's perfectly fine. But that's what the conversation's all about. So let's see. That would make me the first one to talk about this one, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'll get the timer started whenever you start talking.
All right. So, Generation 7, Sun and Moon. So, here's the thing with Sun and Moon, right? Is that it's with Generation 6, it sort of started off a trend of, not really sort of pushing forward that third version. And then it kind of did, but in the Generation 5 way, it got really confusing from this point in terms of how they were going to do a third game. It seems they opted for a sequel as well. Listen, Generation 7 overall, I don't think its story is bad. I think it's pretty decent, and I think the environments are pretty good, and I think there's a whole selection of Pokemon that are pretty good. I think the Island Challenge is really unique. I think Ultra Beasts were a cool after story that allowed you to get your hands on some really, really weird Pokemon. However, this is where the complimenting kind of stops, because the amount of hand-holding in Generation 7, regardless of what version you're playing, is absolutely dreadful. There is way too many text boxes in Generation 7 that half the time it feels like I'm playing a visual novel, and that really does suck. There's a lot of great things about Generation 7 that I could sing their praises for, but they essentially took a lot of the game away from me by holding my hand so much. The other thing is that it told a pretty coherent story, and a pretty good one at that. I can't even really fault it that much. The Ultra Beast and Nihilego and Lucamine's sort of dark corruption and all that stuff, and Gladion involved. Was all really good, but then they left it off with the impression in the first two games that Lily was going to Kanto to go and find a way to sort of cure her mother, and we're like, oh wow, that's going to be what they're going to move on to the next generation. Well, not the next generation, but the follow-up. And I was really excited about that, and it never fucking happened. It was like the same argument that you had about Giovanni and his thing, except it was in Generation 7, and it was arguably a lot worse because they actually hinted at something happening. Something that would be like more fruitful than just somebody getting an ending, but like a future hope for the next game. Like we would go back to Kanto or whatever, or, you know, we would actually find a new place to explore. And then when it come into Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, it just come back to, here's Rainbow Rocket. Hooray. Fantastic. And that was kind of a pain in the ass. There were a lot of characters in the game that were great. Lusamine, Lily, Gladian were a good trio, as well as their dad. I cannot remember his name. No, I can't remember his name. On his little poker island, which was great. Team Skull was fantastic. Really did not care for the Aether Foundation whatsoever. They can get buggered. But the overall push throughout the story is pretty good, and the fact that it has a really like deep and rich lore for these 4 islands is great, but it does get overshadowed with the amount it wants to talk to you about it rather than discover it yourself, and that is kind of annoying. That's all I really got to say about Generation 7.
No, that's fair enough. There's a lot of good points in there, actually. Yeah, no.
Yeah,
fair enough.
Anyway, I'll let you push forward and get your positive comments out.
I do have some differing points. So whenever you're ready to start.
Yeah, all right. It's a go, man.
All right. So, in my opinion, this is 3D Pokemon at its best. Visually, it's really good, especially in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. The theme, especially of like Hawaii and that kind of culture, was brilliant. I think the Pokemon designs were awesome as well. I think they're some of the best in the whole series. The story was definitely really good, especially coming off of Gen 6. It's funny because Gen 6 is sandwiched in between 2 really good Pokemon stories. But you know, I feel that it doesn't quite rival Gen 5, but it's definitely not. It's trying to competently tell a story, and I think it does. But you know, they introduced regional forms. That is one of the best additions in all of the series. I'm going to make a bold statement. Regional forms is the best thing that they've ever introduced in the series. Just putting that out there. And they are still doing it to this day. Even with Legends Arceus, with Hisuian Pokemon. That's not even a new generational game. That's a mid-gen game. They've never done that before. That's how big regional forms are, and they did it. They started off really well in Gen 7, while it was only Gen 1 Pokemon. Obviously, that got expanded on later down on the line. But yeah, I'll touch on Let's Go briefly as well. The art style, gorgeous. I love the art style of Let's Go. But it suffers the same problems as Gen 1. But overall, the generation as a whole, I think it's really good. Yeah, that's about all I have to say,
That's
honestly. The obviously the text boxes thing, it does hold your hand a lot. But as someone who went through the games, just kind of taking in everything. I really tried to take my time with it, especially because it was the first game that I ever pre-ordered. Pokemon Sun was the first game I ever pre-ordered and got on launch day. I really did take my time with it, and I think it probably a bit of nostalgia goggles on that front because of the fact that it was the first game I ever pre-ordered. That's a big thing. But it was also a huge talking point among my friend group. It was a huge thing. Every new announcement that they had, all the new Pokemon, all the new regional forms, we were all, chatting about it. It was the first time I'd really had that connection with other people, other than just my best friend, about Pokemon. And I distinctly remember the one time that anyone has probably ever used Battle Royals in Gen 7 was at my birthday party. We were all, we all did a whole big Battle Royale, and it was a lot of fun. Which I think there's a lot of potential with Battle Royales. They should have tried it a bit more, especially in Gen 8. I feel like it would have fit really well in Gen 8. But no, that's all I really have to say. Oh, also, did I mention the removal of HMs? It's a pretty big one.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
No,
Here's the thing: is like I think Generation 7 could have been a better Pokemon game if it just didn't talk to you so much or try to like explain everything so much.
Yeah, and it's a very valid criticism.
Yeah, it does.
Like, it does certainly do that. But
listen,
yeah, no.
There is one person I know that is an absolute avid hater of Generation 7, like more than anybody else on the planet, and that person is Drew. And you know what? Like, I understand how he feels. I do. Not just because he's my friend, but because I can understand that as a Pokemon player, like, it feels like an experience that's crafted for a younger audience, right? And if you don't have a connection to the story, like if you don't care too much about the story, which he didn't, I don't think. Whereas I actually did get like decently invested in like where these characters were going. It definitely brought the experience up for me a bit. But I also don't feel that excuses some of its shortcomings, like its cliffhanger ending where it never came to a follow-up. That really come down to the same thing you were talking about Giovanni earlier, where she's just like, oh, I'm going to go to Kanto, and then it's just like to find a cure for my mother. It's like, cool. Does she ever get cured? No. She kind of just perpetually remains sick forever, and we don't know where Lily's gone. That's kind of just what happened to that character. And that, like, stuff like that's a little bit annoying, right? But, like, Team Skull is easily one of the best villain groups ever crafted for Pokemon. There is, I don't think anybody can question that. They take a second seat to Team Plasma for me for very obvious reasons, because Team Plasma has like an internal conflict going on. Yeah, that's right. They have an internal conflict going on, which makes their story stupid compelling. But these guys have an internal conflict as well, but I don't feel it's as impactful as Plasma's in Black 2, White 2. But overall, yeah, like I absolutely understand how people can love the game, but like looking at it from my perspective, personally, it definitely tried too hard to introduce a new generation of Pokemon, like a new generation of Pokemon games into the game, Pokemon fans into the games. But it kind of dialed it back really harsh. Like the Sun and Moon anime is really fucking good. If you want to watch a Pokemon anime and you want to have a campy fun time, please go and watch the Sun and Moon anime on Netflix. It is really good. And I told Drew that too. I'm like, listen, I know you don't like Sun and Moon, but the anime is actually worth watching. It's a lot of fun. And you know what, like that sort of does just pertain to like the fact that the last two generations, the anime was better than the games. Like personally, I you know, they didn't move too far off the story beats of the main villains in the anime. Like Lysandra was still trying to take over the world, but they made the situation more dire in the anime. And then like the stuff with the Ultra Beasts and stuff like that in the Sun and Moon anime, they made them into like a fun, like, hey, we're Power Rangers type deal. And that was really cool. And like I feel like you know, that really helps lend to the fact that Alola can be a great region, right? And It's the only time, spoiler alert for the anime, I suppose, it's the only time Ash has ever actually fucking won a league. So, you know, like, I do understand that from a perspective, but unfortunately, I do think, like, it doesn't introduce anything, except for maybe, obviously, regional variants. I don't think it introduces anything to the series that changes the game so much that I need to be explained what's going on, yet it tries to explain what's going on too much. So I actually think it sits at about a 3 for me, personally. What about you?
Okay. That's fair enough. I think, personally, as much as I want to give it a 5, because I love it a lot, it's a 4. It does... Well, I didn't even mention Z moves, because that's how, you know, inconsequential they were in the grand scheme of things. They were an interesting idea, not really executed incredibly well, but like I said, in my own personal opinion, I think regional variants are the best thing that Pokemon has done since Pokemon. Like, it is such a universal, like, thing, you know, like, you could introduce any new region with any, like, unique thing, and you can still put a unique spin on a lot of older Pokemon, and I think that just, it opened up the doors for so many possibilities, and even going into Gen 8 especially, it added evolution, like new evolutions to those Pokemon, and that's obviously continued in Legends and stuff. But we'll get into the Gen 8 stuff in a moment, of course. But yeah, no, I hold Gen 7 very close to my heart. I feel like Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon are, if you're going for gameplay, they're the games you play, but if you're going for story, it's obviously Sun and Moon, because they change it a minuscule amount, but it changes the dynamic between Lily and Lusamine, and it changes that whole conflict, and I don't really like the way they handled it. But also, they made Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon decently hard. Like, it's not a breeze. But, you know, depends, I guess.
I will sort of take note of that in my head about regional variants, like for you, and saying that it was one of the best things I've ever introduced, because going into Gen 8, I do need to talk about something which has honestly changed the game for me, which is, you know, a few things. And it definitely is going to affect, like, it definitely has affected my opinion over time of the following subject being Gen 8. So this one is yours for the taking. It's the last one we've got. And like, it's been a long journey. We're here at nearly 2.5 hours, but we're nearly there. But like, in saying that as well, I think it's fair clear to realize that this generation isn't finished yet. So most of this is going to be basis off of what we have from Sword and Shield and its DLCs. And and if anybody is listening in the past of this episode, just take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because at this point, we do not have Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, and we don't have Pokemon Arceus Legends. So that could change the ballpark completely. But as for now, we're making this basis based on Sword and Shield and its DLCs. So, Meta, I'm going to let you take the lead on this one.
Absolutely. Okay. Whenever you're ready, man. I'm just going to start talking. So, I feel like the introduction of Pokemon roaming in the overworld rather than just being in tall grass changed the game. It made just going through each route, going through the wild area especially, feel a lot more like it made the game feel a lot more alive, and that definitely played a big part in me it being the first game that I ever completed the Pokédex in just because I wanted to. Like my my motivation for completing the Pokédexes in previous games, which I'd only done in like one, was just I wanted the living dex because it's a cool idea, but I never really like went through a game and was like, I'm gonna complete the Pokédex. This was the first time I ever did that, and I had a really, really fun time doing it. I loved every second of it. I think raids also helped a lot with the sense of playing with other people. It felt like we were playing Pokemon together, but like together against, Pokemon. It's a weird way to put it, but I think raids were brilliant, especially with the how they tie into Dynamax. I think Dynamax is a really good mechanic. It's much better than Megas and Z-moves competitively. I think there's a lot more strategy to it. And I think Gigantamaxing is also pretty cool because it brings back that whole, like, oh, there's a new form for this Pokemon, it's really cool. That same kind of thing that Megas had. I also want to talk about the story. It was a huge letdown. I think that's pretty unanimous, but it has probably the most potential to be an incredible story. They just missed the mark entirely. I feel like if Rose could have been such an incredible villain, kind of like someone from Persona 5 Royal, the third semester of that. Don't want to spoil it because it's incredible. Go play it. But very similar to that. Like you sympathize with him, and you even to a certain degree agree with him. Like, yes, this is a problem. This needs to be this issue needs to be stopped. But also there are other things. Oh, god damn it! I still haven't touched the DLC yet.
It's alright. I'll let you talk about the DLC.
But okay, cool. But yeah, Hop's character arc also was really, really good. One of my favorites in the series. It felt really, really real. With him going, like, him not wanting to bring shame to his brother's name, and then eventually becoming the professor's assistant, which I felt was a really good conclusion to his character. But yeah, it just, if it weren't for that, the story would just be completely not great. The DLCs though, I'll try to make this really quick. The Isle of Armor was it improved upon the wild area a lot, and it definitely showed potential for what they could do in the future. The story, was really short. It was kind of meh. But the introductions that they made with the new Gigantamaxes and the the new Pokemon were good. I enjoyed them. I got my money's worth, considering it was only half of the DLC. And then the what was it called? Frozen Tundra or something like that. Crown Tundra. Crown Tundra was awesome. I loved it. I loved the little expeditions that you went on to go find each of the legendaries, and the little interactions, and having to actually chase down the roaming legendaries. You see them flying around. That is awesome. That was like roaming legendaries at its best, in my opinion. And also, Dynamax Adventures, they were just raids, but better, I think. Just the DLCs improved upon the base game so much, so much. And if you were on the fence about Sword and Shield, like, you played through it, you were like, yeah, I don't know if I'll pick it up. Like, I don't know if I'll play the DLCs. Play it. It will definitely be a better experience if you like Pokemon, the gameplay.
Yep.
Anyway, That was definitely
that's
longer.
okay. But, like, here's the thing:
But-
is like it's in the current generation, right? So it's very easy to sort of get
Yeah,
lost
totally.
in it. It like because it's the most fresh in our minds, technically. So that's
definitely.
without any semblance of a doubt. Anyway, I am free and ready to talk about it.
Yeah, sure, man. Whenever you're ready to go.
Alright, I am good to go. I'm going to start. So, Sword and Shield, I think what you said is pretty much nail on the head with the story, and I don't really want to talk about it. The story fell stupidly flat, very, very quickly, and that's a shame. And there was a lot that they could have done with the whole, Dynamaxing and all that stuff. And they also could have done a hell of a lot more in general for that. The wild area is a very unique and cool concept that works in a lot of ways, and I think that's great, but unfortunately it is very buggy even to this day, especially with the online play. The online play does not work correctly, and that is really terrible. That sucks, with the cards and like refreshing constantly and then having to search just to refresh properly. It's stupid. It's not good, and that sucks. But like Wild Area as a concept is really good, and I'm glad that they tried something new, which is definitely 100% sort of on the right. Now, pushing past that, I do want to talk about the 3 things that change Pokemon in a very positive way that I don't think can leave the series. And that is how they handle competitive battling in Sword and Shield. Having a ranking system and stuff like that, really good. Having, miniature seasons for them and seeing how far you can climb and like all that stuff and see where you sit in ranks, all really good. Getting rewarded for that, perfect, brilliant. It gives people the chance to play competitively for a miniature prize reward, which is an incentive to keep playing in that competitive scene, and that's brilliant. Like I think that's extremely important for Pokemon. It definitely does the PvP the best in the series. There's no question about that. You cannot really dispute it. That's how it is. That also leads into breeding mechanics as well. Making a perfect Pokemon has never been easier than in Sword and Shield. They cut down the time so significantly that you can build all 600 of those Pokemon in Sword and Shield. 600 odd in Sword and Shield. I think it's more now, actually. I can't remember, but there's a fair bit of Pokemon in there, and I feel like you could competitively raise one of each of those Pokemon really, really easy. It's very quick to the mark. It's not hard to get EXP items to push your Pokemon up. You don't have to grind them in battling to level them up. You just go and do raids, and you get rewarded for doing raids as well as EXP candies to level them up. Breeding is really simple to do. Min-max breeding is really simple to do, which is very important to that. And overall, when it comes to the Pokedex and stuff like that as well, breeding it just made it easier to complete the Pokedex in that game, and it was great. There was no... I don't think anybody can fault the breeding or the competitive play at all. Now, max raid battles, I feel like people could... I will finish this point. Max raid battles, I do feel like people could dispute it, but honestly, it is one of the best additions they've ever made to the Pokemon game, and this is what I would argue to be the best addition that they've ever added to a Pokemon game. Not because max raid battles in the current state that they are in the regular wild areas are great, because they're not, right? They're not good in the sense that taking on one Pokemon to get that Pokemon is fine, and it works fine and operates fine, but finding groups in Sword and Shield is really bad. Like, it's really annoying. It's better off to just tackle them with friends. You can't dispute that. That's just how it is. Joining randoms groups is near impossible. You will almost always get locked out before you even get the chance. But that's when you move into the DLC and you get the Max Raid Adventures or Dynamax Adventures or whatever you want to call them. Dynamax Adventures are the single best minigame to ever be introduced into Pokemon for a very simple reason, and that is challenging content with friends. They force you to use rental Pokemon and catch your Pokemon along the way and form your party until you hit the boss. Your reward is the chance at a shiny legendary or just a legendary if you just want the legendary, right? You also get stuff back from it to help you develop your Pokemon teams, while also getting that chance to sort of pick up a lot of shinies on the mainstay of it. It is a really good shiny hunting method, for one. Being able to pair up with 4 of your friends and tackle one of those things is great, and it's a good farming method for everybody involved, no matter what. It's challenging, especially against Pokemon like Zygarde that have multiple AoE moves. It is honestly just the perfect PvE content for Pokemon. And I would be very disappointed if they take it away instead of just improving on it, because improving on it is what needs to be done. It adds a whole new element to Pokemon that is anything outside of, like trading or battling with your friends. It gives you an activity to do together. And that is what is most important about Dynamax raids. Those 3 things combined have changed my opinion on Sword and Shield pretty much entirely. They're like, wow. The thing is like, the game is rough at its core. There is no denial in that. But the things it does to improve the quality of the end game are really, really good. And I would be sad to see any of those things go.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, you brought up the competitive stuff, especially. That was huge. It has never been easier to train competitive Pokemon, and I tried in Gen 7. I couldn't be bothered though because it was a lot of work. But with the introduction of mints and you literally just being able to drug up your Pokemon until their EVs are full, instead of having to, put 10 on and then you go. You can just put all 26 on, boost up one stat entirely. Really, really good in terms of the competitive quality of life, and just quality of life in general. Being able to access your entire box anywhere. There was a lot of good stuff in it, and what you said about raids, I could not agree more. Like, they are probably one of my favorite things to come out of Pokemon in recent times. I remember for a solid 4 days, me and my friends were just... I hadn't even beaten the first gym yet, because I was having so much fun just doing raids with friends. I had level 60s before the first gym. So obviously the whole game was pretty easy for me. But also, the champion, and hell, even in the late game, it's not too incredibly easy. I did a Nuzlocke, or at least most of a Nuzlocke. I'm too scared to finish it because of how badly the 8th gym leader went for me. Yeah, the 8th gym leader was a bloodbath. I went in with 6 Pokemon, a full strategy on how to beat it, and I went out of there with 2 Pokemon barely alive. If I had messed up those last few turns, I would have wiped and lost the entire run. It was intense, and I am scared to continue it. I haven't touched it in a year. I don't think I will go back to it, honestly, but I do want to at some point. But yeah, no, the game's not a pushover towards the end. But yeah, no, I think you brought up a lot of good points regarding competitive and the Max Raids and Dynamax Adventures as well.
Yep.
Were probably my favorite part of the DLC. That was what I was most excited about from the get-go. Was that new co-op mode. It was more than just raids. It was exciting.
That's right, yeah.
And I'm quite upset that a lot of my friends who I did play Sword and Shield with, and the raids and stuff at the start, when the games were new, I was quite upset that they dropped off when the Crown Tundra came out, because that would have been so much more fun and so much more to do with them and to do with other people.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I I do hope that they bring back something like that in the next you know, generation, and even not necessarily like to the level that they did in Sword and Shield in Legends Arceus, but I hope they did at least something in Legends. But yeah, no, that's about all I.
The one
to say.
thing I forgot to mention actually, now that you like you've sort of talked about it, but like when you are talking about the DLC, here's that is technically the shadow fourth of my reasons why the like Sword and Shield changed. I've changed my opinion on Sword and Shield the more I've played it, and it's that if DLCs replace the third version, I wouldn't be depressed.
I would be.
Yeah, so would I, because DLCs, you're paying a cost price not to play another fucking game again, but to get additional content for a game you're already playing.
Exactly.
And look,
yeah,
the additional content. No, you're right. The additional content was more than you would ever get in a third version.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yes,
it
it
costs
does,
less
yeah.
as well. Like it's only half the price of a third version because you're not buying the same game again.
Absolutely.
And that's always been the issue with third versions. It's like you're buying the same game again, little improvements, but there's honestly not that much. But with DLCs, I wholeheartedly believed that was way better than anything a third version could offer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Without any sense of a doubt, that's, you know, if the series doesn't move forward like that, then like I would be extremely depressed, because honestly it has just given so much more of a reason to sort of go back to the game as opposed to buying a new copy and playing it out of spite, which, you know, and that's yeah, it's just if anybody hasn't played the DLC, you need to play it, because it makes 150 million improvements like to the actual game itself. I know that it's an extra cost price on top of the game, but let's be real. If you were going to buy the third version anyway, then there's no reason for you not to do it. So that is kind of where it's at. But we are at the apex of this list, so now we actually need to give a score for Generation 8. And what we need to do is we actually need to summarize this whole thing. So, Generation 8, I'm going to let you score first.
Oh boy, this is you're putting me on the spot here, mate. Jeez. So, I really, really enjoyed my time with Gen 8. It's not pinnacle Pokemon. It's no Gen 5. It's no Gen 4. You know, it's no Gen 7 even. At least for me, obviously. But I feel like it's good enough, at least in the gameplay department, for me to give it a 4.
I think we're spot on that too.
I know. Yeah, I definitely do think so, and I think that will still hold true, even as Brilliant Diamond, Shining Pearl, and Legends Arceus, as they come out. If we count them as Gen 8, I think we do. Yeah, Legends Arceus is the game that, you know, it's very clear that they were experimenting with in Gen 8. They really, really wanted to take that leap, and I am so happy that they are taking that leap. They are just going head first into what they tried out. You know, they dipped their toes in the water, and now they're going swimming.
Yeah, that's right.
And I'm so excited for what
Me
the future
too.
holds. It's
I think
brilliant.
like a lot of the people that sort of do look back on it and see the performance issues and stuff like that, and you know what, when it comes down to people being angry and stuff like that with Gen 8, like I'm not going to say that their points are invalid, right? It does feel like a lot more work could have gone into Generation 8. There is no question about that. They could have delayed the games. They chose not to because they had to make a Christmas release date. That information isn't public as to whether we actually know that, but it is so blatantly obvious that is the fact.
It's it's not hard to
so
tell.
you know, but the thing is once you get through it, and if you're ever like interested in competitive Pokemon or raising Pokemon or you know, collecting like shinies or something like that, Sword and Shield, like despite not having all the Pokemon in it, is one of the best ways to do all of those things, and it's also one of the best ways to play Pokemon with your friends, and that is coming off the back of saying that it has one of the worst online systems. But the activities in it make up for the fact that, like, if you would go into like Dynamax Adventures, especially, is very, very compelling content that has no end. At least in the scheme of, you can use it to farm materials and stuff like that to help level your competitive teams. Everything meshes in the end game so well that it becomes one big experience. Like if you could be smashing max raids for this shiny legendary for so long, you'll finally get that shiny legendary, and on the course of that journey, you haven't just wasted your time, you've earned the materials to level up that Pokemon to a competitive level. And that is, you know, like a competitive level 100, and that is mad. That is really good. It's hard for me to tell on the future of like when Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl and Arceus Legends comes out. But like, I have hopes, right? Diamond and Pearl. Like I've made it clear that Generation 4 was kind of a rough point for me here. But I'm hoping that I can go back to those games with positive memories and play through them in a positive light and sort of maybe take a better appreciation from them this time around. I'm really hoping that. I really want to be able to do that. And then, you know, Legends Arceus, it is the game that a lot of people have been hoping would come out of this, even before Sword and Shield. Like when Breath of the Wild came out, a lot of people were like, wow, open world Pokemon's possibility, we could see it happen. And it is happening. It is happening. It might look a lot rough around the edges at the moment, but it is visibly improving over time, right? So, yeah. And 100%. You know what? Like, I can't wait for it, man.
Like, yeah. Back on the topic of Sword and Shield, it's something I neglected to mention in my.
We'll do that and then we'll finish up.
Yeah, of course. The reason why I think a lot of people trash on it is obviously there's issues with the visuals. Like there's no question about it. There's issues with the post game. There's issues with a lot of things. But I don't think it's necessarily bad. I just think it's inconsistent. I think what it does well, it does really well. It hits it out of the park. But what it does poorly, it really stinks. Like even the visuals, in my opinion, are inconsistent. Like you look at a place like the Glimwood Tangle or like Balonlia, Winden, Motostoke, they all look really good. Postwick, Wedgehurst, all those like country towns, they look really nice, but you go to the wild area
flat,
and it's just it's very flat, it's very washed out, it's very blurry, it's not pleasant to look at, which for me at least I could overlook with the gameplay and collecting Pokemon and all that. It's what drives me to play Pokemon, and the Pokemon designs, especially in Gen 8, were really, really good, and that's something that I really loved about them. But I won't get into that because we're really, really pushing time with Gen 8. Yeah, but you know, it's fresh on everyone's memory. But you know, it's definitely inconsistent, and I think that's everyone's issue. But I really hope, my one hope for Legends Arceus and Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl and the future is just bring the consistency back to a better place. I want that Pokemon game that everyone can just look at and think,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
it's
Yeah.
a good game. Like, yeah, because it's been a decent while since we've had a game like that. I would say it's probably been since Gen 5. Since like that opinion has been pretty much, just the general consensus
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the game.
Yep. 100% agree on
Yep.
that. Definitely. All right. Well, let's wrap this up then, and we're gonna go through. We're gonna go through our
Yeah,
total.
absolutely.
We're gonna go through our total numbers here, my friend. So, are you ready for this?
Oh boy.
Are you ready for this? Right.
I'm
So
ready.
I think we
yeah.
know what's going to be on top, and I think we know what's going to be on bottom, but it's going to be interesting where everything sort of sits in the middle, right? So the numbers are a little bit interesting, right? So coming in last place is Generation 6. I think both of us have pretty much explained this pretty well. I think the games are rough because of their transition into 3D, and I think they dropped the ball a lot. And
Yes.
it really does feel like it was just for the sacrifice of having 3D Pokemon, which is not enough to grab an audience. I think that is just sort of where it's at. So that's how it ended up on the bottom. Like, that's the unfortunate truth for it. Next,
And that was a
that was a 4. Yeah, it was
Like,
a significantly
yeah,
lower
okay.
score, right? And before we continue
Yeah.
with this list, I'd like to sort of just keep it fresh in everyone's mind, because the next one will definitely trigger people, right? Is that this is coming from the perspective of people who have entered Pokemon at different generations. So there were differentiating scores in this that led to lower scores. Definitely 100% there was. So Generation 1 came in second to last. That would make a lot of people angry that I know. Definitely. It came up.
Yeah,
It came
no.
up a 6. It came up a 6. And that was because you gave it a 2 and I gave it a 4. And that is definitely.
I did give it a 2.
But that's the thing. That is definitely down to our difference in when we started with these games.
Yeah, definitely. And that was kind of the whole, point of us doing this. That was what we wanted to see. But no, yeah, it's going to make some people a little bit pointy fingery at me.
Look, I look.
But no.
Honestly, you can't be blamed, because it is the truth. Going back to those,
of course.
Going back to those games, when you and people need to look at this without rose-tinted glasses, right? Is if Generation 1 wasn't an experience that you experienced closer to the time that it was out, then it is definitely a rougher experience. There's no question about it. And look, I gave it a 4, you gave it a 2. The reason I gave it a 4 is because I have a lot of positive experiences with Generation 1, and I can forgive a lot of its shortcomings, even sort of in 2021. But that's because I hold those fond memories, and that is just how it is, right? So we will move on from that, though, and we will push to third to last, which was Generation 7 with 7 points. Yeah.
Really?
So Generation 7 had 7 points. You gave it 4, I gave it a 3. It's the thing about Generation 7 is it's if you can forgive its handholdiness and like the amount of texts you're scrolling through, and you can get over that ending that can either be interpreted as disappointing or just like a where are they going on type thing, then it is a better experience. But personally, like, the hand holding for me did it. Like that was kind of just like, you gave me an ending that sounded like it was leading to better things, and you held my hand the entire time, so that's kind of why I lowered it. But like a lot of the other things about the game I did actually like. There is no question about that. And for you, obviously, you hold a closer memory to that because it was a much more social experience between you and your friends. And
yeah, absolutely. It was it was the social Pokemon experience that I had in my childhood, because obviously I didn't have that many friends growing up that were into Pokemon. Even in like year 3, 4, people were, over it. People were getting into other things. They were like, oh, whatever. But Gen 7 is really where I got to connect with other people through Pokemon, and I definitely hold that a lot closer to. I guess you could say it's similar to how people regard Gen 1 or even Gen 2, because that was when everyone was going crazy over Pokemon. That was their social experience with it, whereas Gen 7 was mine.
Absolutely. All right. Well, knowing that was under the top 3, that means we only have Generation 2, Generation 3, Generation 4, and Generation 5 left. And if you've caught my little slip up just there, that means that we have one that has tied. We have a tie for third place.
Ooh.
Our tie for third place was Generation 2 and Generation 3 at 8 points. Yeah. I think both. Yeah. I think both these generations, like these were like my prime generations for Pokemon, Generation 2 and Generation 3. I don't remember Generation 3 probably as fondly as like Drew does, for example. I definitely played a lot of Generation 3, but I also, out of my friends group, I'm pretty sure I was like the only person that played Generation 2. So, like a lot of my friends played Generation 1, skipped Generation 2 because, news didn't circulate as well at the time, and video games where we weren't as accessible, so they very largely dropped off that end. But when the GBA came out, the gaming scene really boomed, so they picked up Generation 3, and they remember that a lot more fondly than I do. But as somebody that did get their hands on Generation 2, Generation 2 is... I think it's personally better, but I do think that both of them have that score for very good reasons.
Yeah, no, absolutely. They're both very good.
Yeah, well,
in
they
their
do
own rights.
what they intended to set out to do very well, and both of them are held very highly in regard by most people. And, I think that's because, like, Generation 3 is definitely the generation with the most modulability, like, in how its systems sort of worked, and how people could approach them, whether it be, like, through the modding scene, or whether it's just a casual player, or whether it was somebody who was looking for more of a challenge. That was definitely Generation 3. And Generation 2 introduced a lot of systems that would become mainstay for Pokemon. And I had a lot of experiences with Gen 2 as a result, sort of thing. I was always interested in the shiny Pokemon and stuff like that. I tried hunting sometimes, got bored really quick because you're a kid and you don't have that attention span. But my point is that, like, there is a very good reason both of those sit in a comfy 8 points for third place, right? So
yeah, absolutely.
That means there's 2 generations left. We know who's at the top. We will discuss that in a second.
Yeah, I think we know.
But Generation 4 came in at second place. Not where I would technically put it on my own personal list. Definitely not. But there is no denying that game introduced a whole new perspective of Pokemon in terms of how you can interact with people through the internet. There was a lot of cool features like the underground and stuff like that, which really elevated that game quite well. The environments were pretty good in Diamond Pearl, Platinum, and overall, I think it is a solid experience. But it is, it's just flawed in my own personal tastes, and sometimes I forget that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. Like I said, the reason why I put it so highly, I put it as a 5, I think, was it's the games that I think of when I think Pokemon. Like, if I think a Pokemon game, it's running around in Diamond and Pearl, or Platinum. like I said, I don't know why. It's just the most Pokemon
yeah.
Pokemon game to me. And even like I said in my 3-minute spiel, I feel like exploration peaked in Diamond Pearl Platinum. Obviously, Diamond Pearl. We didn't actually touch on the whole speed thing in Diamond Pearl, but we let's not get into that. But in Platinum, when they fixed all that, exploration was at its best, I feel. At least in terms of like going about the whole map, the way it connected. Like I said, it's just the most Pokemon to me.
But it has that score for a reason.
Absolutely.
It has that score for a reason. There's no question about that.
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, we have our top winner. Our top winner is Generation 5. Now, a lot of people might come to this list and go, "Oh, you're biased. You're both Generation 5 fans." And you know what? You are correct. You are correct. We are both Generation 5 fans. But you know what was my generation before this? It was Generation 2. Now,
for good
a lot
reasons.
of people that are fans of Pokemon will always hold... It's much like a Zelda, right? A lot of people will hold the first generation they play to be their favorite, right? And Gen 2 was mine for a long time. And it took Generation 5 for me to change my mind. And that says volumes about just like Generation 5 in general. When you know how stubborn Pokemon fans can be about what they consider a good Pokemon game, you would think it would be hard to change my mind on Generation 2. Mainly because even the remakes of Generation 2 came out before Generation 5, and those games are considered some of the best to play in the series if you want the complete Pokemon experience, right? So remakes of Generation 2, you would think, holy crap, like that is my jam, right? And it was my jam, but then Generation 5 came out, and Black and White and Black 2 and White 2 made a whole coherent package in terms of story, in terms of like Pokemon designs, which a lot of people gloss over to pick out Trubbish or Vanillish, as we discussed. And there's a lot of dynamic characters in those games, whether it be for the gym leaders or N or Getsus or, you know, the MCs, your rivals, all of those characters, they've all got their own different energy, they've all got their own personality, and I think you feel the most in that game than you do in any other Pokemon game, personally.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like, there is a very, very good multitude of reasons as to why we've both agreed upon Gen 5 being the best. I think both of us went into this knowing that Gen 5 was going to be at the top. Yeah, of course. Absolutely. And you know what? Yeah, we might be a bit biased, but you know, this at the end of the day, this is just a big opinion piece. And that's the whole point of this. But Gen 5 just it's such an experience that you really don't find anywhere else in the franchise. There's so many moving parts with you know, the rivals, the evil team, the inner conflict with those evil teams, your rivals' arcs, and all these different characters. All the characters are really memorable. All the incredible Pokemon designs. The art style is awesome. The music, you cannot forget the music. Like, once you listen to Driftvale City, you only want to listen to Driftvale City. Overall, I don't think there was a way that Gen 5 could have been topped for me.
But like that was one of your first Pokemon games, and like looking at it from that perspective, it is kind of like a lot of people could dismiss that and they'd just be like, oh well, it was one of your first Pokemon games, or it was your first Pokemon game, sort of thing. Like, of course that's going to be your opinion, right? But I think where that sort of comes in is like, I agree with a lot of the points you're putting out, and you agree a lot of the points that I'm putting out as somebody that was like, you know, looking back on Pokemon through my history with it, I'm kind of like, you know, this is a game changer. This did change the formula of Pokemon to a degree where it became so good for just that brief moment in time when Generation 5 existed. And it was during a time when the DS was dying. The 3DS was already out when Black 2 and White 2 came out. Like, we were already moving on to different things. And as such, Black 2 and White 2 got really overshadowed, and they give so much context to the first games that it makes a complete package. So it's a shame that a lot of people missed it.
I think, well, yeah, the whole rose-tinted glasses thing is, yeah, you could say that, but for me, at least personally, for this, I wanted to, even for a while, I've been thinking about Pokemon a lot more critically. I've been thinking about everything a lot more critically. And I really wanted, especially for this, to just, to really just look at it, well, not objectively, obviously, because it's still opinionated, but objectively compared to the other generations and how I felt about them. And I really wanted to justify my love for Gen 5, because it really, it may have been my first Pokemon games, but they're not perfect, right? They've got flaws, of course. Like, I don't think the post game of Black and White 1, I don't think that was all that incredible. Like, they're not perfect, but they're the strongest, I feel, games in the series. And like, other Pokemon games have introduced things that, like I said, regional forms, the best thing that I think they've introduced in the series. And with Max Raids, also another one of the best things that they've ever done with this series. Other games can top Gen 5. It's just they haven't put one out that has yet. Like, I don't think that you going into Gen 5 would have thought that Gen 5 would end up topping Gen 2.
No, absolutely not. No.
Nobody would have thought that.
I didn't think that ever.
I think
for any generation. Yeah, I never went into a new generation thinking that, I was going to get, I was going to get so blown away that Gen 2 would look like shit, like, ever. I never thought that would happen, and it never did happen.
Absolutely.
And, it still didn't happen with Gen 5, quite clearly, but Gen 5 did top it.
Yeah, and I'm going to be honest, from what I'm seeing of Legends Arceus, it has the potential to be that game that blows my socks off, and beats Gen 5 for me. Mm-hmm. It's very possible that, obviously I've been dreaming about this game since I was a small child. Of course I'm going to be unreasonably excited for it. But if they do it well enough to genuinely beat Gen 5 for me, then, well, there you go. I'm not going to see that coming. Nobody could see that coming. Yeah, it's going to take a lot of effort to beat Gen 5. Not just for me, but for a lot of other people who feel the same. It's just they need to do everything that they did well in Gen 5 and just hit it out of the park again, which is difficult to top because they did it so well. But they could at any time, and
no, there's just that little bit of extra heart that needs to happen, and that is kind of like the moral of it all. Really, I feel like there was a lot of heart put into Gen 5, trying to tell a more compelling story, and it is it's taken years for people to sort of open their eyes and realize that maybe Gen's not as bad as they thought. Like Gen 5's not as bad as they thought. And I think it's slowly encroaching on people just how good it was. And I do hope that people do find their discovery and love for Generation 5. So, I'm kind of hoping that if anybody listens to this list and they gave Gen 5 a miss, I hope this has kind of convinced you that it's more than entirely possible to love that generation.
Yeah. And if you play through Pokemon games just mashing A through the dialogue, if you do that, I am going to come to your house.
No,
and break
you can't. You can't skip the dialogue in Gen 5. And that's the thing. Is like Gen 5 is a story, which a lot of Pokemon games before it or whatever, a lot of it was just skippable text, but most of the text in Gen 5 relates to something. Right?
It's a big story that's constantly moving, and even in little character dialogue with like, for example, that scene with Alda and Sharon, or Elisa and Bianca, those are essential parts to their character arcs. Those are big turning points in their characters, and if you skip one of those scenes, you miss so much. Because those scenes are so...
Yeah, they're raw.
Those scenes are really good. And even in just, like, your fight against Charon in Victory Road, there is a lot of there's a lot of heart in that fight because of what you've seen Charon go through, and how his character has changed and evolved. It's just...
Yeah. Just do it.
Go play Gen 5, man. Just go play it. Go don't play it. Experience it. Experience Gen 5.
Man. It's so good.
It's
absolutely.
It's something you need to do. This is just Gen 5 podcast. Gen 5.
No.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
That's what this is.
I think that's definitely what it's turned into. But you know what? There's a reason for it. Gen 5 deserves it. It is. That's right. It's deserved. If there's anything to take from this list to anybody that skipped Gen 5, it's maybe try again. You will.
Maybe don't.
Don't skip the text. Read the text, please. But anyway, that being said, that was a pretty lengthy conversation and a very good list. I think we got a lot of feelings out, even though we only gave ourselves like 3 minutes each to talk, and sometimes we break that limit a bit.
Yeah.
But we definitely had a very very good chat. I think that this list is actually more accurate than I thought it would turn out to be in terms of how I feel. Maybe with the exception of Gen 4 being higher than I thought, but that is my own personal opinion. But overall, I think it's pretty accurate. I think that, like, between people who ended up in two different spots of Pokemon loving, that we have come to this conclusion, and I think it's a pretty good list. I think it's very well tiered. So I do want to give a big thank you to you, Meta, for coming to the House of Mario this week, because you've absolutely knocked it out of the ballpark, man. This has been it has been a 3-hour conversation. It is really hard to keep up a 3-hour, 15-minute conversation. Trust me, Drew and I have done it multiple times. It can get very difficult. But
oh my gosh.
Yeah, but like, I mean, that's Pokemon, right? It's easy to get lost.
Oh boy.
There's a lot more that we could have possibly discussed on this topic. Absolutely. And I definitely think that, if it ever happened again, and we had a conversation similar to this again in the next 20 years when 5 more generations of Pokemon come out, that, like, this conversation would span like 10 hours. There's just no way. Like, it does. You can't condense like that entire 25-year history of a great series down to like minuscule finite bits of sand. It just doesn't work, man.
Yeah. Our original plan was to try and spend 20
Yes.
minutes on each generation. Just as a whole.
Yeah, that ain't
and
happening, man.
obviously that fell through. Because, 20 minutes times by 8, what is that? 2 hours and
Yeah.
a bit?
But
That-
like,
yeah, we went a bit
then
over.
think of like
Went a bit
the
over.
bleed
But
over,
overall,
and then think about the Pokemon news that come out this week. Like,
Mm.
that would have easily been a 4.5
Yeah.
hour podcast.
Oh, totally. If we but then again, obviously we went more in depth with
Yeah.
stuff like Gen 5, Gen 8,
Yeah.
especially Gen 8, compared to our little the little discussions about Gen 3 and 6 specifically. Like those were definitely differently sized. But yeah, no, overall I think we've
I
done
think so
this
too, man.
really, really well. And
Yeah.
it was fun.
Thank
enjoyed
you
a
for
lot.
making the time to come on. Obviously, during this little bit of a Drew drought, having that extra hand to make a good this is quality. I like this content. This is good content right here. And you know what? Hashtag Meta is a champ in the Discord. If you get this far, you deserve that hashtag, man. Meta is definitely a champ. So what we're gonna do
Thank you.
is we're gonna call it on that, my friend. I think we're both at like the 12
Good
p.m.
idea.
mark where we're like, all right, 12 a.m. mark rather, where we're like, right, we need to go to bed.
Oh my god.
All right,
Yeah,
so thank
absolutely.
you for everyone for listening to the House of Mario today, episode 203. If you enjoyed listening to the podcast, you could leave us a really nice Apple review, just like a really, really juicy one. That would be great. You can follow us on socials, the House Mario at Twitter, and then you've got Drew at iDrewby, me at IVRevan, and Meta, do you want your Twitter in there?
Yeah, sure. I don't really post much, just memes and shit. I just retweet stuff, but it's at Mettadox, METTADUX. It's nothing special. You don't need to. Just come talk to us.
Yeah,
Come
and
talk
that's
to
the
me
next
in the
thing to
Discord. Come
plug.
talk to us in the Discord. That's what we should be.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the
in the
next thing we should
Discord.
plug.
We
But
get
yeah.
together and we talk about
Yeah.
things pretty much daily at this point, and it is a very active and little chirpy community, and we love it so much. And you can definitely find the link to
Absolutely.
that in our show notes down the bottom. And you know what? Sometimes we do these things called I'm gonna say this because this actually might gauge some interest. Sometimes Drew and I like to do things in Discord, which is similar. Which is stages, I should just say, stages in Discord where we will have people listen live in on the podcast. And you can put your hand up and we can select you to speak if you want to talk about a specific subject while we're in the rec room or whatever. That's what we do, man. So if you ever feel like getting in on the podcast and helping us talk about a topic or whatever have you, or you want your opinion heard or whatever, you can jump in on that when we get back to regular scheduled content. You can also watch the show on Drew's YouTube channel at iDrewby and Twitch channel under the same name too whenever we do live stuff. And I think that's about it for the plugs, my man. We do have the Patreon covered now by our new outro, so that's not a problem anymore, so I don't have to even mention it. I want to say one more wholeheartedly thank you to Meta for jumping on. Thank you, man. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me. I love coming on and talking to you boys. It's
Absolutely,
always
man.
a
Thank you
grand
so
old
much.
time.
And to everybody else, the doors are now closing, and we will see you next week. Bye.
Ciao.
You just listened to The House of Mario, a South Australian Nintendo podcast. Be sure to follow the boys on Twitter, leave an Apple Podcasts review, and join the Discord server to be a part of the community. A big thank you to these legends who support the show on Patreon at the producer level: Alex Harding, Sam Hay, and DJ. If you would also like your name in the credits, Head over to patreon.com/iDrewby and choose the tier that works for you. Until next time, we hope your day is 120 Power Star rated.